Good morning, everybody. We'll just give it 30 seconds for people to filter in this morning. If you're joining us on the recording, then welcome. This is Teachmeet ECT Icons. This is a Teachmeet aimed at early career teachers or anybody who is newish to teaching. This is aimed at you. This is hopefully going to help you in your first few years of teaching, give you some insights from very experienced practitioners who've picked some fantastic session titles that I'll run through in a minute. I'll also run through the running order that we've got this morning. We've got speakers from a whole range of subjects and domains, speaking about a whole range of topics this morning. And before we kick off, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, today's event is sponsored by Pupil Progress and Teachers Love Stationery. So if you want to get involved or hear more from them, you're going to hear two presentations from them this morning about what they can do to support you or your school. So without further ado, let me run through the running order. The hashtag is TMECT. So if you're on social media like Twitter, you can just pop in that hashtag TMECT. And you can follow along, hopefully, with the tweets and the live stream. The live stream is now up on YouTube. It's also at Teachmeet Icons on Twitter, and it's also on my personal Twitter account as well. So there's three places you can watch the stream this morning. Teachmeet Icons, free Teachmeets for teaching professionals. They're free face-to-face and online. If you want to find out more about our upcoming face-to-face events, just visit teachmeeticons.com. Click on the tab that says upcoming events, and you can find out more about all the events that we've got coming up. We've got lots of face-to-face events coming up in Manchester and more online events coming up too. Let me run through the running order for today. We've got some fantastic speakers lined up. In about 2 minutes' time, we've got Chris Wardle. Chris is going to be talking about adopting the culture in a school, but is it right for you? He's a deputy head teacher, and he's going to be focusing on that. At 9:55, we're going to hear from Pupil Progress, who are going to tell us about how they can support well-being and data in your school or your context. We've then got Naomi Roberts at 10 o'clock, who is going to be talking about how to say no, which is a great topic. 10:20, we've got Khalil Rouse talking about behaviour management that you won't see in observations. Khalil is a pastoral safeguarding and wellbeing lead. 10:40, we're going to hear from Teachers Love Stationery. 10:45, we've got Sobia Iqbal with The Subtle Art of Managing Up, which is a very interesting title. Looking forward to that. 11:05, we've got Rebecca Walker, who you may know from her podcasting and her previous leading of TMMFL Icons and lots of other things that she does within the MFL community and beyond. Her title is Engaging with CPD Outside of Your School Without Getting Overwhelmed. And then we've got Jake Hunton at 11:45 with 5 potential strategies for ECTs. Okay, so that's the running order. Hope you enjoy it. As I say, you can follow along on Twitter. If you want to post a comment, you can do so on YouTube. You just go on YouTube and click on the comments. You can post a comment in the chat, and then I can throw it up on screen. So if you have a question for any of the speakers today, it would be fantastic to hear from you, and you can just put that question into the comments on YouTube. I'm really fired up and excited about this event, as you can tell. I'm going to bring Chris in now. Hi, Chris. Good morning.
Good morning, Tom.
Good to see you.
And you, Tom.
Now, full disclosure, Chris used to give me a lift into school just before the pandemic. And we used to have to always stop at Cooperative to get my Diet Cokes on the way into school and other things that I've forgotten to get. So he's a very nice man. Now, Chris, do you want to, just before I hand over to you, do you want to just outline what you're going to be talking about today? Your title.
Sure. My name's Chris Wardle, as you can see on the screen. I'm a deputy head teacher at St George's School in Blackpool, and I've also got the privilege at the moment of working 3 days a week at Fleetwood High School as associate head of school improvement. So it's a real privilege to work in both schools. My title is Adopting a Culture in a School, and how vital it is. I have added on that little strap line, is it right for you? But you only get to know that. You get to know that pre you join. You'll also get to know that when you're actually in a school, but more when you're immersed in a school. So the outline of what I'm going to be looking at is top tips that you should be doing in terms of culture before you even set through your foot through the door. And then I've had some outstanding advice from 3 of our ECTs at St George's School, and at Emily, Dan, and John. And I'm going to be sharing some of their things. And what I was saying to Tom earlier was it's uncanny. The things that I would have mentioned, they actually stated and said. So their words are my words are their words. And I think that's something in itself that we're all on point.
Loving it. Right, I'm going to hand over to you, Chris, and looking forward to hearing this talk.
Brilliant. If you've got any questions, I think Tom's been through how you can ask questions, etc. And I'll be taking those, and I'll have a quick look. And if there's anything that I'll add during the talk, I will do. So firstly, a head teacher once said to me, and it was brilliant advice, that he never makes a decision without consulting policy or procedure. And I think that was a vital piece of information. So if you don't know something, put your foot on the ball and consult policy and procedure. Don't be rushed into making a suggestion or answering a colleague or something like that without first looking at the policy and procedure. And what policy and procedure am I talking about in this sense? Well, the DfE have given statutory induction guidance for ECTs. I'm just going to run through a few highlights within that document. Page 14 is a suitable post for induction. It's vital that you understand what the rule book is. It's not just there for the school, it's there for you, it's there for everybody. It's there and it's online, and you really should have gone through that and immerse yourselves in it. That's the first thing that I would do. Get your pen out, get your ruler out, make annotations around it. If there's anything you don't understand, raise it with your mentor in school. Page 15, ensure and reduce timetables for ECTs. That's critical, isn't it? That you've got the correct allotted time as you as an ECT, because it's rightfully yours. Page 18, minimum induction period, what that should be. And there's all sorts of caveats in there, so have a good read through that. And page 20, appointment of an induction tutor and mentor. That's critical. And then also extremely critical, it's the right induction tutor and mentor. Performance reviews and interim assessments is there. And interestingly, I noted on page 17, paragraph 2.27, it says, who do you raise an issue to if your induction tutor has not resolved an issue? These are all steps that you can go through as a professional. And these are all things that I would consider as being a top tip and my first step as an ECT is know the documentary advice that's given to us by the Department for Education. So I'm going to move on now. I'm going to keep on that topic of policy and procedure, but what I am going to do is I'm going to focus on the policy and procedures of the school. The very first thing that I would do is go to the school website, and I would be looking for the visions, the values, and the mission of the school. Often that is set by the head teacher. It has changed a little bit nowadays, where it might be the trust that are set the vision and the values and the mission. But in many schools, it's the head teacher, it's the values of the head teacher, it's the mission of the head teacher, and it's the vision of the head teacher. So know those, because this is the boss, this is the leader, and align yourselves to those values. Look at what the vision is for the school. What do they want for their pupils within the school? What do they want for you? What do they want for the community? That is an absolutely critical place to start. Values-driven leadership. Know what the values are before you even set foot into the building. Know what those values are. Articulate those values. And often on school websites, they'll tell you what those values mean in that school. They will write a paragraph after each value just saying, what does it mean? What does that value mean? How is it manifested itself within the school? Why is it such an anchor within that school? So that's a great place to start. There are treasure trove of materials on the school website. So many. The policies and procedures on the school website, look at them all. They're often statutory policies that are given to parents, safeguarding policy. Know the stuff before you go in, and really adopt it and look at it, and make sure that you don't just skim read it, that you engage with it, like you would expect a pupil to engage with documents. Underline it, pieces of information, write little notes at the side of anything that you don't understand, a bit like I said before with the statutory guidance from the DfE, and make sure you ask those questions. It will also demonstrate your qualities, as well as you sit down with your mentor and you've got policy in front of you and you've got questions to ask because you're hungry to learn. Most importantly, you're hungry to adopt the visions of that school, the values of that school, the culture of that school. You want to be a part of the furniture, and you want to do that as seamlessly as possible. And there's an awful lot there before you even set foot through the door that's there for you. Behaviour policy, look at it, read it. Anything you don't understand, nail it with the mentor when you get into school. Look at Compare Schools, the Compare Schools website. Look at the data, 2019 data, but look at it. It will give you an idea of where the strengths and the areas for development are of the school. Parents do it, not all parents, but parents will do it. They'll look at data to see which school they're going to send their children to. Surely, if you're going to be working in that school, you should know what is the data saying to you. And if you don't understand the data, you don't understand what's on that Compare Schools website when you're flicking through the various tabs, then that, again, it's a question that you can start asking your mentor, and you're wanting to delve into information. Again, it shows your worth. Look at the Ofsted report. If it's a recent Ofsted report, the more recent, the better. Have a look at it, and have a look at the strengths of the school. Where are they really strong? There might be departments that are incredibly strong that have been noted by Ofsted, and I'd want to visit those departments if I was an ECT. I want to go and see what's going on there, and I'd want to learn. So again, immersing yourself. If it's been noted by Ofsted, by a professional who's come in to have a look at the school, then it's worthwhile then for you to use that as a guidebook to help you. So again, with your mentor, arrange with your mentor, take a lead. Don't just sit there and be passive, but say to your mentor, can I go and have a look at this department? Can I have a look at this department? The best advice I can give when you're immersing yourself in culture is observe, observe, observe. Go and see teachers teach. Go and see what's happening. Observe the corridor culture. Observe the refectory or the canteen culture. Look at it before school, after school. Watch what happens. Just because you're not expected possibly to be outside of school on exit, go and have a look at it. Just because you're not expected to be at 8 o'clock on the gate, go and have a look at it. Go and say hello to the children as they're coming through the door. You might not be expected to do that job, but embrace it. Ask your mentor, can I go on the gate? They're not going to say no. It's another pair of hands on the gate as the kids are walking through the door, and you get to say, good morning, sir. Good morning, miss. Good morning, and then get to learn the names. And so you're speaking the names to them as they're walking through the door. How are you? How did the football go last night? And again, you're immersing yourself in the culture, but you're opening up avenues that are just different to the classroom. It's through that downtime that you can really make a big impact, and that children will actually see that you are there for them, and that is absolutely vital. When you get in, immerse yourself, I've said, in those policies. I've mentioned that, and now I'm going to go to, I've had the privilege of watching our ECTs grow in school, and I asked them what advice would they give, and like I said in that preamble, their advice was very similar to my advice. So I'm going to go to Emily first. Emily says, and I love this so much, set the bar high. Set the bar high with all of your classes. Teach to the top. Teach the very best that you can. Scaffold for those within your classes. Make sure that those children are challenged, and do not be thinking that those children can't, because those children can, with the skill of you, the practitioner that's in front of them, a great quality teacher. So observe those great quality teachers in school. You be that great quality teacher in school, and you really challenge those children in front of you. Emily, Dan and John say, make sure you adopt the school culture in your classroom and follow the behaviour policy. That is vital, absolutely vital, that you learn that behaviour policy and that you act it out. And any questions that you've got beforehand, make sure that you are speaking to not just your mentor, the head of department, the teacher next door. Make sure that you go through and you're fully understanding of what that policy is. And that policy, just follow it. I'm not going to go through St George's policy or Fleetwood policy. I'm just going to talk about you look at that policy and you adapt to that policy and you make sure you are aligned to it and you fully understand it, because I can tell you one thing, the children know it. That's really important. The children will know that policy. They will know it like the back of the hand. I approached 2 ladies yesterday and both of them had coats on in the canteen. And my words to them were, oh, can you just remind me of what the policy is on coats in school? They knew instantly what that policy was. So it's vital that you understand what the rules are too and get to know what the rules are. Emily and John, don't fall foul and veer from the behaviour policy. Don't start making it up. At the schools that I work in, you are meant to follow that behaviour policy, but most importantly, don't veer off it. Stick to it. It's there to support you. At St George's School, I will speak about that in terms of leaders are there to support you. At Fleetwood, leaders are there to support you. We are to support you in that behaviour policy. So make sure you just stick to that behaviour policy and you will be supported 100%, and stick to that. So that's great advice from Emily and John. Again, Emily and John, find a hobby to minimize your workload. This is not only for teaching staff, this is for associate staff too. So hardworking, everybody's so hardworking, but the associate teams that I work with, they've got so much to do. And just like myself, I have so much to do. You'll have lists upon lists, but you've got to have a cut-off. And you've got to remember that family comes first. You've got to remember that you've got to have your own well-being in check. So that idea that Emily's put, she actually said it's harder said than done. But if that's going to the gym, make sure you go to the gym. Make sure you have a cut-off from work, because I can tell you, you could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you will still not be done. It's really important that you have that cut-off. And the earlier that you learn that, the better. If you're having a problem with workload, if you're having a problem, don't sit there in silence. It's exactly what we'd say to the children. Don't sit in silence. Make sure you speak to somebody who can support you. Quite often, your mentor will be that skilled practitioner. The head of department will be your skilled practitioner. Talk to them. The more you talk, the better you will feel. I've got here from Emily, specialist sessions have been really incredible to her on behaviour, safeguarding, on character points, which is the St George's reward system, or the values, the heart values at Fleetwood School. Make sure you know what that reward system is. We don't like the term reward in either school. What we like is that children demonstrate those values. So they're called values or character systems. How wonderful. So you look at your values of your school and then you align points, you align specialisms to those children, rewards to those children. I said that word rewards, but it's not a reward. It's been aligned to the character or aligned to the values. So do they have high expectations? Are they respectful? Are they hardworking? All of those things, they're aligned to your values. If children demonstrate that, then at Fleetwood, you give them a heart point. At St George's, you give them a character point. And then we have the golden tickets. Know about the golden tickets. Celebrate the golden tickets. It's part of the culture. When the children are walking down the corridor, if you see a flash of gold, you congratulate that person. Well done, sir. Well done, miss. You have got a golden ticket. You are extraordinary. But these are words that are part of culture. These are words that you should be articulating in the corridors, at the school gate, when you leave the school gate, during the refectory. I'll pick up just now. I'm going off my notes, but John said something. It's incredible. And you know what? John lives this. John said, make sure you spend time with the children. John has his dinner every single day in the refectory with the children. There are many staff, our leadership team, Fleetwood leadership team, St George's leadership team, they have their dinner with the pupils in the refectory or the canteen. And that's so important. We lead by example, but now we've got staff in both schools that have dinner with the children, that talk to the children. And as an ECT, I would say that's one of the most beneficial things that you can do. Get out at break, get out at dinner, make sure you're out in the morning and in the afternoon, not every single day, because I realize the work pressures and all of that. But make sure you get out, pencil it in when you're going to go, put it into your calendar on your phone or on your computer that you're going to be out and about on this period, or this in between this lesson, you're going to go out at break, you can go out at lunch or after school or before school, pencil them in, dot them in throughout the week, because that's the opportunity that you get to talk to children in a different way and having conversations that you may not have all the time in the classroom, because you are focusing in those high expectations and that work that you're doing. That's really, really important. And yes, I'm not saying that you can't have down conversations with children in classrooms, goodness forbid. You are going to have those conversations too, but outside in unstructured time, it just gives you more time to spend with those children. John says curriculum booklets have saved an awful lot of planning time. At St George's and at Fleetwood, we have curriculum booklets. So know and understand the policy, procedure, the microscripts behind those curriculum booklets. Both schools that I work in are adopting microscripts. They are going down to the nth degree about everything from how on-call operates to how children come in the morning. If there's a morning lineup, what does it look like? If there's a morning meeting, what does it look like? The character point system or the value system, there is a script. Follow those scripts. So if your school has microscripts, ask for them, adopt them, read them, make notes on them, live them, walk them out. If in your school transitions are incredibly important, which they are in both the schools that I work in, make sure you follow them to the nth degree. There will be a script. Follow that script about how you should act. And if you've got any questions, do not sit in silence. Ask about those scripts. I haven't mentioned too much of Dan. Dan is like all three of those people I've mentioned, an incredible teacher. And Dan goes off to say, make sure that you are always that the quality of teaching in your classroom is of the highest caliber, which is very similar to what Emily said at the start. Make sure that your culture in your classroom is right. That came from all three. Culture is key. I'm just having a look here. Use school systems to command the room from John. Slant, shape, steps from Barry Smith. Barry has visited both of the schools that I'm working in. We use slant, shape, steps, sit up and listen, ask and answer questions, never interrupt, track the teacher. That is slant. It's really important that you understand and can articulate that. And that you are able to give, if you talk about shape answers, and in both schools I work in, if I say the word slant, I get children that are ready, listening, tracking the teacher. Both schools that I work in do that. Shape answers, answering in full sentences, hands away from mouth, articulate, project, and eye contact. That is, again, it's just normal things that we'd ask for in society. You're going for an interview, that's how you behave. It's the culture of the school. That's what we want from them. I'm keeping an eye on time. I think I've got 2 minutes. Tom, remain. Oh, I love this one.
Don't worry, mate. You've got 2 minutes. Go on.
I love this. John says, remain humble. Remain humble. And I think that goes for everybody. Head teacher, cleaner, whoever you are, it doesn't matter who you are in an institution, remain humble, and it's okay to make mistakes. I love that. My assemblies next week at Fleetwood School are going to be about failure, of which I know a lot about. And it's failure, and it's how you fail, and then it's how you move on. And that is so vital for all of us. Do not be afraid of failure. Embrace failure, because failure is key to improvement. Clear expectations, John says at the start, through a school ECT induction handbook. If your school hasn't got one of them, get it written. A school ECT induction handbook that you can give your ECTs before they even start and say, this is us, read it. And in there really should be all the microscripts. There should be the policies and procedures that you want the staff to be accustomed to, and get them to do their homework. And don't be afraid. I like this one from Dan. Don't be afraid to try something new. So in the classroom, don't be afraid. You're going into a new culture, a new school. Do not be afraid to do new things. Embrace them. Embrace change. Align to it. Love it. And good luck.
Got one question for you, Chris, because we're limited on time. But one question came in, which is, what would your advice be to an ECT who comes into a school and then kind of 2 to 3 months in, they feel like they can't align to the culture, or it's going to be very difficult for them to align to the culture? What would your advice be to them in that situation?
Well, firstly, I'd go back to policy and procedure again and see what your options are. So I'd look at that DFE guidance with a hand lens and make sure that I knew it back to front. And your first thing is you're going to mention something to your mentor. It may be that it's your understanding of the culture, and that might be key to unlocking what that is. So it depends what the issue is. If it's that you can't adopt it because you don't understand it, that's something that you can deal with. If it's something that is completely foreign to you, it's all the way at the other side, then you'll have big decisions to make as an ECT. And don't forget, because it's a 2-year deal, you're not trapped in that 2-year deal. You're an adult and you'll have decisions to make. It won't be career ending, but I would rather you make big decisions early. If you are completely against the policy and procedures and you are completely against the school that you have joined and that you have signed your name to, that you sort out those problems early, because 2 years of unhappiness is a long 2 years indeed.
Yeah, spot on, Chris. Brilliant, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak. I've taken a huge amount from that, and I've tweeted lots of your little golden nuggets quotes, Chris, so everyone can see them.
Thanks very much, Tom. I really enjoyed it, and good luck to everybody else on the program, and I hope you get a lot of benefit from it. Goodbye.
Thanks,
and enjoy
See
your
you later.
Saturdays.
Bye.
Bye.
Right, that was Chris. Goodness me, this running order is going to go like that. Can't wait to hear from Naomi. I know Naomi's here in the backstage area, so Naomi will be here in about 5 minutes. Before that, Barnaby, I'm going to put you on screen. Barnaby, good morning. Oh, took you off. Sorry.
That was enough.
Yeah.
I don't want to say any more.
How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Tom. Very good.
Good stuff. I think you want to share your screen, don't you?
I do. Yeah, I'll bring up the the screen.
So just while you're doing that, Barnaby represents Pupil Progress. Pupil Progress are one of our key sponsors, and they sponsor all of our events, which is very nice of them. But not only that, when you actually explore Pupil Progress, you will see how much time Pupil Progress can save you, whether that be as a leader, whether that be as a middle leader, a teacher, whatever level you're at. You can, I think, Barnaby, correct me if I'm wrong, you can still have a go at Pupil Progress, possibly for free. I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah.
There you go. So if you want to check it out and you want to find out more, I'm sure Barnaby at the end of this short presentation will tell you where and what to do. So I'm going to hand over to Barnaby without further ado.
So morning, everyone. As Tom says, what I'm going to show you here with Pupil Progress, our main aim is to support teachers at every level, right from ECT, as you are, up to executive heads of trusts. To give you a bit of background, I used to be a teacher myself, was for 12 years before coming out of teaching to set this up with Brett to the idea of Pupil Progress really is to help teachers with having meaningful data and be able to use that data to have a really big impact on what they teach, making sure they've got really efficient use of time, identifying the students that you need to work with most. And as I say, really saving teachers time, because we know how important having good data is. So we built trackers for every exam board, every course that there is, so that you can just focus on using those trackers to then tell you the information that you need to be able to go on and teach. So I'm going to just take an example here with history. So for GCSE history, as an example, we've got the 3 units. The tracker's already built to match up with it, to assess in exactly the way the exam board will. So that way, you know, you've got really accurate data. Now, the main structure, of course, will follow the past paper structure. So you'll have in there all your QLA already built in, so that you can then just start entering your data, and then that will then pull through and work out your grades for you. But it also won't just do it based on a single paper. As you build up those end of topic tests, as you build up past papers, it will use all of that information to show you where your students are actually working at right at this point. So as you go through, as I say, you might not be using past papers to start off with. You're most likely to be doing little mini tests. So you can add your own end of topic tests in here. And when you add your end of topic tests, I'm just going to skip to one there where I've already added in the questions. You can just add your question level analysis if you wish, where you can address each of the different skills that you want that assessment to check on. When you save that, that'll add on to your tracker, and it will also scale up any marks and apply those to the right grade boundaries, so that you know that the information that you're using is going to be the best and most reliable information at any point. You'll also see that as I'm going through, that's also linking up to a topic summary. Now, if I switch over to a version where we've got lots of data in already, this is where it starts becoming really powerful. And this is a bit that we're most passionate about. Data, especially early on, is so important. Right in that first year or two, I was really fortunate to have someone who had spreadsheets where they were already built, and I'd also know how much time it took for them to maintain and look after those, and the amount of times that we messed them up for them. And we've taken away all that pain for them. But also for me, it was that understanding of going, right, now I've done this assessment, I can see here that question 3 is one that we really need to work on. We should really be getting similarities and differences. So I'm going to work on that as a class. Once you've got multiple assessments in, you can then start seeing actually which are your units where you need to make the biggest difference. Well, here it's unit 3. So I'm going to go now have a look through this. Are there particular skill areas that I should work on within that? Yeah, our evaluating sources is something that we can do. So you can then go back and evaluate your curriculum, what you're going to be teaching your next lessons, and in your different contexts, address those same skills. You've also got your skill summary, which will pull across any skills that are assessed across the whole lot to make sure that you can address those issues and those skill parts. And as you can see, you've also got students marked up as red or yellow if they're underperforming compared to their targets, green if they're on, and you can really go away and celebrate the students who are getting on blues because they are doing fantastically. They're beating their targets and they're moving in the right direction. So once you've got your data in, it's also not just about you, this is also about communicating that with the students and giving them ownership over their own grades. So here you can see we've got a student report, which has got that breakdown of all the marks and the grades as well. Once they get this in their hands, we know this has a big impact on them seeing where they need to make the differences too. And so that takes the pressure off you too. I'm just going to switch over to maths, and just to show you that when you've got subjects where there's past papers that have got lots of different past papers, you can just go through, click and add them. We've already got them preloaded, so you can then just choose the paper that you want to add and it will have all that question level analysis on there. We also do trackers for BTEC, Tech Awards, vocational courses. Again, courses that when you first come to teaching can have quite complicated combinations. So we've actually supported a lot of teachers who were under the impression students were on one grade, but because they've missed out on a particular rule and they've then seen that on our tracker, it's then helped them to understand how the course is assessed, and that's even with experienced teachers. So just to kind of go back to what Tom said, just because so a lot of you I know will be ECTs in the room, and so you don't need to worry about sort of how you can access it, like, or whether you need to go to your head department and things like that. This is something that is available for everybody. So if you click on the Get Started Now, there is a free trial that you can use, which is a month. Big recommendation would be, particularly if you've got year 10s at the moment, you've got end of year exams, use it for that. Get your year 10 data in there, get in some end of topic tests to see where your students are at. When you enter in your school details, if you are a Pixel school, you'll actually have access for ongoing for up to 2 subjects at no cost. At no point do you need to do any financial details or anything like that. This is just actually about giving you the right support. And if you use it and you find it really useful, then do take it back to your head of departments. And if they want to see how it can actually affect or be useful to them and the rest of the team, then we'll be happy to extend that for them as well, so that they can see the benefits for the wider team.
Oh, Barnaby, I wish I could present like you, mate. Hey,
Tom, you do it far more naturally.
I'll tell you. Right, listen, no, that was fantastic. Thanks, mate.
Brilliant.
And as I said, check out Pupil Progress. I'm going to be flagging up the links again later on, so you can get over there. Do you want to say the website just so they know?
Yeah, pupilprogress.com.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can put into the chat. I think it's private chat.
I can do that. I can do that for you, mate.
Brilliant.
I'll do that later.
Yeah, just pop it on pupilprogress.com and get up to the top, and that will link you in.
No problem.
You can have a little look at it.
Cheers, Barnaby. Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Cheers, Tom. Thanks. Good luck for the rest of the day.
Cheers. Bye. Okay. Now got Naomi. Naomi Roberts. How are we doing?
Yes, I'm doing good. Not too bad at all.
Fantastic. Now, listen, let me ask you, because before we get onto your actual talk, you've got a book out, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
Oh, there it is.
There it is, yeah. I'll be reading a few examples from it, but just in general, talking about my practice. But yeah, it came out in February. You can find it on Amazon, Bloomsbury, Waterstones, if you search.
Now, my question is, and I say this to everyone who writes books, is how did you manage to do that and do your full-time job?
With difficulty.
And everything else.
Alongside full-time work, it was weekend writing, it was holiday writing, it was writer's block completely, and other times I'd write at least, a chapter, other times just a paragraph. So it was a real struggle, but I really enjoyed the process once I got into it. I might have a break before I do it again. I'm pretty certain of it. But it's just something I really wanted to do, just the passion to help other people, really, and put it into words. And just if someone picks up the book and it helps them in whatever situation they're going through, that's great. That's why I wrote it.
Fantastic. And I don't know if your title has changed. The one you gave me was How to Say No.
Yes, it's still the same. So I'll be talking a little bit about elements of how, you say no and it's the right thing to do in some situations. Yeah. But I will draw upon awareness and transparency and how you just need to be, a reflective individual as an ECT, as all teachers do.
I like the sound of this already. I'm going to pass over to you. And and just if there's any questions, I'll pop them on screen. If anyone's watching on YouTube, you can write in the comments. So if you have a question for Naomi, you can just pop it in the comment and we'll put it on screen. And also I might pop back up on screen if there's any questions just from people tweeting.
That sounds great. Brilliant.
All right. Thanks.
Lovely. So the main reason I wrote this book was purely to help other people, as I said. And for the last couple of years, there's been situations I've seen, especially in ECT kind of circumstances. Obviously, it was NQT before, and it's more recently changed to ECT, that they didn't sit well with me. And so I wanted to kind of put experiences and draw upon other people's experiences and give those ECTs that understanding that, yes, it can be a struggle, but just don't give in. It's there's always going to be barriers. There's always going to be obstacles. And it's just about getting past those obstacles in the best way you can. Everyone has their experiences. And yes, they can be really quite bad experiences. But, someone else, it's always about how someone else feels. And then they project that onto you. That's not necessarily something you need to take on. And I think that's what I mean by the title No, is that obviously people think no is a bad word. It's sometimes it can be, and sometimes it's not always. And it's that understanding that actually situations that do occur, just be brave enough to say no. Because my experience as a NQT, as it was then, I wasn't brave enough. So I continued and carried on working throughout the day as hard as I could and doing the best that I could. And to be quite honest, I spent every evening crying. Because of the situation that I was in, and because, unfortunately, my mentor wasn't as skilled, should I say, as they should be. And I do know that there's many of those situations still that occur, and that you don't have that, audacity or courage to say anything at that stage because you're still learning. And so I kind of thought, no, we'll battle on, resilience, let's keep going. Yes, I'll have a little cry in the evening, but it's not going to stop me from working hard. I genuinely thought, as some people would think as well, even now, if I bring something up, they could cause me further problems or go down the route of failing. It wasn't until my deputy head at the time, Stuart Wainwright, which I talk about a little bit in the book, came in and said, "What's the issue? You're doing a great job." No one had ever said that before, not once. I was just pulling myself along with the kind of hope that I had left. No one else was saying that. I may have had glimpses of that from maybe the head teacher, but not so much my mentor. And of course, you're with your mentor every single day, more or less. So I think it's really important that as an ECT, just that understanding that there will be challenges, but it will make you a better teacher in the long run because you will be more resilient. And I'm not saying you have to go through those challenges. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing, but I do think it makes me now reflect and think, this is not acceptable. Whereas if I hadn't had that situation, I may not have looked at situations now and understood the workload, resilience, and how to last in education, not give up and kind of move on to something else. Of course, there are exceptional circumstances. Completely understand that. I'm talking about those circumstances that when someone else projects onto you, talks down to you, doesn't appreciate, for it, they might have an issue where they think you're actually quite good and they're trying to pull you down a notch or two. All of those kind of scenarios where we just need to keep an eye on. And I do firmly believe in that idea of fewer things in greater depth, and the digging deeper and lingering longer that Mary Myatt has mentioned before, about simple things at a time, not overloading. We chunk learning for the children. We need to do the same for our adults. There's a lot going on in the world. Lots of people are experiencing things outside of school, and they're doing their best to switch off from those within school, but they need to be able to take on information and not feel that they are being overloaded. They're humans at the end of the day. I'm currently working with an ECT at my school at the moment, and yes, he's gone through lots of different challenges. Everyone's different, but he's working so hard currently on building the relationships in the classroom. He's got to build that awareness throughout the school. That's his next step. And again, we have those open conversations. He's fully aware of that. But within the classroom, he's built that rapport. And again, that's really important with the parents, with the children. They know the routine. They know what's expected. They know that if there's an issue that's brought up, that things will get sorted. So it's that consistency and that calmness in approach. And on that note, it's really important that however you're feeling inside, and of course, I know you would have been told this on many different occasions, never let that show, like a panic, never let that show to the children or the parents. If you feel that way, of course, take time out, go and speak to a senior leader, go and do what you need to do in order to recoup, take a breather, have a cup of tea, coffee, whatever you need to bring yourself back to kind of, regulate yourself. But just remember that calm approach is so, so important. I always think about that because even now I have a class of 34 currently. Previous to that, I had 36. I'm obviously assistant head as well. If I have difficult parents, actually, I'm going to change that. I don't think it's, again, I write about this in the book, difficult has a certain emphasis, I guess. It's not that they're difficult, it's that they're emotionally charged. So when I have emotionally charged parents that feel a certain way, of course, it's their children. They're going to feel emotional. They're going to want to bring something up and talk through if they're not happy. I always let them offload first. So and I never take it personally because it really never is. It's a case of how they're feeling about the situation. Of course, it's how we may have dealt with it, but I often listen and then come to a compromise of a next step. Because at that point in time, it's hot air. They need to talk it through. If you say no, or no, I don't have time for this, or can we organize a meeting? Of course, follow it up with a meeting. But in that moment, it is best just to listen, because you'll find that people get to the point where they've said what they need to say, and then their realization of, they're on board with this, they're listening, gradually follows. So just remember that when you are dealing with difficult situations. So yeah, parents wise, obviously children as well, there'll be things that pop up. And going back to the whole saying no and understanding yourself, that comes down to awareness. So you will do a good job if you know your parameters, if you know your limitations. And if you take on too much, it won't be good. It's obvious. It's the burnout stage. It's you don't have the headspace to think clearly, and that's very important to make those key decisions. If you make a wrong decision in the moment, that can be not catastrophic, but it can cause a few knock-on effects. So, and I've had a few conversations with my ECT where he's literally, and he won't mind me talking about this at all, where he's come into the staff room and he said, I need to talk to you. I'm like, go ahead, tell me. And he'll say, I've said something this morning and I don't think I've said the right thing. And he'll talk it through, but it's that realization of, and that's grown throughout the year of, okay, I didn't quite get it right. How am I going to put it right? But he will come up with a solution now of, right, I need to get in contact with this parent to preempt the situation. Whereas before I was having to say, right, this is what you need to do, like a step-by-step guide. And it's important to have that proactivity, that understanding of what comes before, what, preempting the situation, right? What are the scenarios? What may happen? So what can we do to ensure that it's a smoother result? Obviously, a good and fair result, but that everyone in all parties are handled in the right way. So, for example, I had a situation this week where an incident happened and I was reflecting about whether or not I should ring, because I was teaching in the afternoon. It happened just at the end of lunch, whether I should ring immediately or whether I should leave it just at the end of the day, just before I jumped into the staff meeting. And I realised that it had to be right at that moment. I'm very lucky in that I've got a trainee teacher currently at the moment who's doing a fantastic job, Mr. Bolton and Joe Bolton. And he was able to step in for that 10 minutes of that phone call. But if I hadn't have done that, it's the knock-on effects. And again, as an ECT, those kind of things will develop as time goes on, dealing with those conversations. But if you observe other members of staff doing that and seeing how they react and how they think and how they reflect, everything just in most cases slots into place. And for example, our ECT, he's going through, he's year 5-6, so he's got the SATs coming up. So there's lots of mocks preparation and talking through how the children are feeling, lots of well-being side things at the moment, and just understanding how to read the situations. And I think that is so important. As a leader as well, I'm very aware of how people are feeling, whether or not they are able to take on information at that point in time. And again, with my ECT, it's that whole idea of filtering what's appropriate for now, what can wait, and just to benefit that person. Everybody is different. We have something called flexible consistency. That idea that obviously it needs to have a high standard and it needs to be consistent, of course. I never lower standards. They always stay up there. But each person and each situation is different. And we've, as a behaviour policy and how we act as a school, we've taken that on. And it's like a logical consequence, that logical conversation. And really that's the same for children as well as adults. Look at that specific scenario and work with what you have. It's never a set rule for everybody because everybody has different experiences. I talk a little bit in the book about neurology and how everybody remembers key events in their life. So like the amygdala remembers, that part of the brain where bad experiences, when they do happen, they often link or attach themselves to prior bad experiences. And that's really key because emotion always comes first. No matter what job you're in, how you'll feel, how good you are at masking emotions and how calm you are on the outset, they always are there. You can be the most rational person in the world, as a teacher, as anybody really, but they will always come to the forefront, and that's when they need to be addressed. And what I've recently thought a lot about and reflected a lot about over the last couple of years is taking away so understanding the why and then removing the emotion, because after talking to lots of different people and having that understanding of what emotion actually is, sometimes they're not always accurate. They're just that attachment to what's happened in the past. So, for example, I say in the book, our brains are hardwired to remember situations, both good and bad. And it does make some situations complex because it immediately harks back to what you've experienced before. But however, if they're handled in the correct way, then you can push through and you understand. And that's not saying there won't be difficult times and times where you need to persevere, really persevere, to the point where you think, God, this is really tough. It's pushing you to the max, where you've reached your end of your emotional capacity. But it's always good to step back, just remove yourself from the situation. And we are all humans at the end of the day, which we obviously know that. But it's important to remember that everyone will, without meaning to, react. And again, it's how you handle those reactions. And I think it's important as well is that leaders as well as teachers are really just have a good understanding of they will get it wrong. So if I make a mistake, I'm more than happy to say, I'm really sorry. I've got that wrong. Obviously, there are some times where I think, oh, wow, I really did get that wrong. And some of the situations are quite funny. But in more serious situations where it's obviously where it's a serious situation, it's those ideas of saying, thanks for correcting me. I didn't realize. I've thought about that. I've reflected. And now I realize what I need to do. That shared understanding. I think mutual respect is so important. And alongside that, trust. Again, I mentioned this in the book. Trust is the basis of all relationships in school, all relationships outside of school, every relationship, I think, in life, actually. If you don't have that trust and that understanding, once that's altered in some way, of course you can get it back. Of course, you have to work very hard to get it back. But if that comment is taken in the wrong way, or if that comment is taken to heart, if that person doesn't realize the impact of that comment, that can be really dangerous. And I've had experiences of that. I'm sure we all have, where you take it on and you think, oh, wow, that is not what I expected. And as a person, I thrive a lot on being appreciated, as everybody does. Not just more for effort than anything else. If you're doing a good job and you're putting that hard work in, it's a natural kind of want. You realize that you're working hard for someone to say, look, you're doing a great job. Just not often, just now and again, just to keep that momentum going. And that's so important, that check-in. My first deputy head, Stuart Wainwright, he used to do that in abundance with all of our staff. I was an NQT at the time. And I finished my training year and then carried on at the same school, got a job there. And he would always check in of a morning. How are you feeling? What are you up to? And those tiny little informal conversations made a world of difference. It completely changed the way I thought about things. And, some people, when I've spoken to them about emotional intelligence and understanding people, they genuinely think, oh, that's just fluffy, doesn't mean anything. It's no, it's the root of everything we encounter in school. That understanding of how someone else works and how you work, and that awareness. If you don't have that, situations in school are really, or can be really tricky. And of course you can develop it, but when someone isn't willing to develop it, or if they're putting up a boundary and saying, no, I'm not going to go there because I don't agree with that way of thinking, it makes it really tricky for everybody involved. It's like understanding body language. If someone's feeling a certain way, child, adult, you pick up on it. You check in with them. How are you feeling? I've noticed this. Is there anything I can do? If you bypass that stage, firstly, the care's gone. Some of the mutual respect as well, because they haven't noticed, that type of idea. And then beyond that, it's that whole care factor. And that's what a good dynamic, positive, understanding classroom and school is based upon. It's that root understanding of all the situations. And another thing that I mentioned in the book, James Keir, who wrote Legacy, the idea of observing a situation. One of my favorite responses, I should say, at the moment. If someone comes to me whilst I'm teaching with an issue that needs to be looked into, I will say, leave it with me. Because I find that if you make a decision in the moment, really quickly, when you're midway through an English lesson, maths lesson, topic lesson, anything that you're doing in that moment, it could be the wrong one. So it's that case of just saying, right, that's fine, that's great. Obviously, if it's an important one, it will have to be done immediately after school. That's not an issue. Hopefully leaders wouldn't put you on the spot like that and say, I need you right now. Sometimes they do, and sometimes you do need to think on the spot. But it's important to remember, going back to this legacy idea, observe, orient, decide, and then act. Don't just act immediately, because you haven't looked at all angles. You need to check that out first.
Wow. Oh my God. Right.
I could go on for days, but I won't.
That was really, really good. Really, really enjoyed that. I've put some of my favorite quotes out on Twitter for that one. Really, really liked it. So thanks, Naomi, for giving up the time.
No problem. I've really enjoyed it.
Tell people where they can get the book then.
So Amazon, Bloomsbury. So if you literally just type in The Emotionally Intelligent Teacher, it will pop up. So feel free to have a browse. It's easily accessible. It's literally like an hour read, but you can dip in and out of it. So
Fantastic.
Go ahead.
Right. Thanks a lot. Chat to you later.
No problem. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Wow. Okay. Khalil.
That was very, very quick. That was very smooth. I like that, Mr. Rogers.
I've learned from you on Teachers Talk Radio, mate. It's all about the transitions. I need some music, though. I need some Khalil Rouse music before I introduce the next guest.
How are you, my friend?
Yeah, not too bad. And yourself?
Not bad. I'm looking forward to the 3-day weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say your talk is, and I'm looking forward to this, behavior management that you won't see in observations.
Indeed, yeah.
That is a hell of a title, that.
Thank you very much. I've nuanced it slightly. I put the word might instead of won't, just because, a little nuance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You need to always put, like, these days, like a little, like, what do you call it? Like a little star and you may have heard this before somewhere or something in there, but that's fine. Indeed, yeah. Right, Khalil, I'm going to hand over to you. And
just to check.
Oh, go.
I believe I've shared my PowerPoint screen. Oh.
There it is. It's right there for you. I'll hand over to you. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Hi, morning. My name is Khalil Rouse, as you'll see on the screen, and my kind of background is also there as well. And the title of this next section of the session or the show or the Teachmeet event is the behavior management you might not see in lesson observations. I originally wanted to say won't, but I didn't want to be as absolutist as that. So I went for the might instead. The plan here is to go through some scenarios and give my kind of advice on what to do in those scenarios and things that I found over my own years of experience, things that have proved quite successful. The caveat is every situation is nuanced. Every situation has its own kind of intricacies and best ways to deal with it. So these aren't one size fits all, but hopefully there'll be things that I speak about that may resonate or be food for thought going forward in your careers. So my background, I'm in my 10th year of teaching. I'm currently a DSL and a member of the senior leadership team. And I'm a maths teacher. So I've been a maths teacher for 10 years now. But my main passion and my main drive is around pastoral safeguarding and well-being. The reason I started or wanted to kind of make this a focus is because I spoke to an ECT in my school and I asked them, what would you want to know? What is it that you don't feel like you're getting from either your mentoring sessions or your observations? And this is the quote essentially that this person said to me. And you've read it already, but I'm going to read it again. And it says, as they said, as an ECT observer, you often see things going well in kids. Kids behave when you go into observations because you're usually observing quite proficient teachers. You're usually observing teachers who have got experience. Maybe they have skills in the behavior management field. So you don't really see things going wrong. So then the member staff said to me, so what happens? So then what do you do when things aren't going so well and the behavior becomes challenging? Because what's the advice there? And what you'll see at the bottom of the screen is a hashtag for pastoral CPD. And this is a little thing that I've been trying to put together via Twitter of different advice. And I know Tom Rogers mentioned Teachers Talk Radio. So I'm one of the Teachers Talk Radio hosts, and I have a show called Pastoral CPD Clinic. And it's where, again, I focus shows on teaching the softer skills, the pastoral side of the role. There's a lot, of course, about the pedagogical stuff and all that side of the role, which is, of course, paramount. But I think the pastoral on the softer side goes hand in hand as well. So the frame of this is the challenging scenarios that I'm going to speak through are as follows. The first one is one that we all come across. We still come across now, regardless of the level of experience you have, whether you're an ECT or you've been teaching for umpteen years. It's a disruptive individual. We're talking about the wannabe class clown, or more so, the defiant, rude pupil who seems hell-bent on wanting to disrupt the lessons that they're in. I'll also be talking about the general topic of when a child is refusing to follow instructions. That could be the more basic instructions of what to do in the lesson, up to maybe refusing to leave a room, for example, because obviously we know that's one of the instructions that in most schools, that is the step you take when you have a disruptive pupil. You ask them to step outside or you use on call, whatever you need to do, what you do if they refuse. I'll also be talking about these acrimonious student-teacher conversations. So I'm talking about the conversations that are likely to happen outside the classroom that may not go so well. So maybe it's a conversation in a circumstance where the child has done something wrong. So obviously the conversation is going to probably have a negative tone to it, but I'm hopefully going to give some advice about how to have that conversation in a way that will be of maximum benefit to both you and the pupil. And the final situation is disruption being caused by multiple pupils. So those lessons, again, that we've all had, probably to this day, we still all have them as maybe one-offs, or if you're early in your career, these could be happening more regularly. And I know they are stressful situations and they do get better, but it seems like it's a bit of a rite of passage, unfortunately. So I'm going to give, hopefully, again, some advice, some pastoral CPD on what to do in these situations. Again, the caveat is there is no one size fits all. We're dealing with young, hormonal teenagers. So they've all got their own kind of strengths, weaknesses, things that make them tick and so on and so forth. So this isn't a one size fits all, as I said, but hopefully the advice I give is going to be useful. If we look at the first example then of the disruptive individual, I like to stress, and I'm going to mention this as a broken record, the importance of building positive relationships. Paramount to trying to improve the behavior of a disruptive individual. If you just start out in your career, you don't know them, they don't know you. Often that is not that enough. That alone means a student is unlikely to want to behave for you. And you need to sometimes accept that at the start of your career. Often for some students, mutual respect is not a given. Often, remember, as they come into your room, they're bringing a whole bunch of previous experiences in school, previous interactions with teachers. So I do not want you to take it personally. I know it can feel personal because it's your lesson. They're in your classroom. They're messing about when you're supposed to be the person in charge. However, they bring a lot of baggage with them. So please do not take it personally. But if you want things to improve, then focusing on building positive relationships with this pupil or these pupils is the first thing to think about. And I know previous speakers have spoken about going out of your way, make it genuine, show a genuine interest in them as an individual. And slowly but surely, if the relationship improves, they'll start to want to work for you. But it's not a quick fix, and it needs to be genuine because kids are very perceptive. So it needs to come from a genuine place that you want to get to know them more. You want to know what makes them tick. That being said, well, if it's a long process, so what do you do in the meantime? One thing that to this day, I make sure I do if a student is being a bit disruptive in terms of silly behavior, calling out, turning around, all those kind of things, is I first assume they've got no idea what they're doing academically. They may, but I'm gonna act like they don't, because that will influence my next steps. If I assume they don't get the work, it means I'm going to try and do some things to make sure they do get the work, to give them no excuse. Because if you get the work, you should be able to get on with it. So I'm going to make sure you get this work. I'm going to make sure that at the beginning of the lesson, if you got your do now, your starter on the board, I'm going to either go over to them straight away, double check they know that first answer. If they don't know that first answer, maybe I'm going to give them a little hint. Maybe I'm going to show them the page in their book that might have the information that they need. I'm going to set them up for success right from the outset. And if they start to realize that you're there with their best interests at heart, maybe things might start to improve as lessons go on. Positive affirmations as they enter the room. Early positive check-ins. Kill them with kindness. You got this. I know you know how to do this. You showed me last lesson. So I'm expecting you to get this first one right. And I'm actually going to pick on you, and you're going to tell the class what the answer is. If that's your first interaction with them, that's going to hopefully set them up for a more positive experience in the classroom. And then maybe we're talking about the situation where you set the class off to work and they're disturbing the lesson. That's when you assume they've got no idea what they're doing academically. So then your first interaction isn't one maybe of a kind of negative get on with it, because maybe they don't know what the work is, maybe. So my advice is you go over, say, right, you know what? I'm going to assume that you're maybe not sure right now, so I'm going to help you out. Let's go through this first one together. And then when you're confident that they know what to do academically, then you say, right, I'm going to circle back in about 5 minutes or so. I used to write the time in their book and say, right, the time is 10:37. I'm going to be back at 10:42, and I want to see how much progress you've made, because you get this now, so there's no excuse. You can do well. And then obviously make sure you do circle back. That hopefully will build some positive relationships. And when you assume they don't get the work, hopefully, again, it can set them up for success. Maybe that doesn't work. Maybe despite all your efforts, they're still being disruptive. So then my next advice here is you need to nullify the audience with the quiet word. Students in this situation like the audience. They like the back and forth. They like people looking at them and maybe seeing that they're getting a bit of a rise out of the teacher. So nullify that. Nullify it. Crouch down. If you need to keep in the classroom because of your policy, that's fine. Crouch down, quiet word that only they can hear. That quiet word is a forward-looking word. That quiet word is, I need you to do this because I need you to do well in the lesson. This is what I want. Make it very tangible, very achievable. I need you to stay facing the front, and I need you to get on with the work. And if you have any issues or you're stuck, you raise your hand. Forward thinking. There's no point having a quiet word where you're reprimanding and telling them off, because then they'll just bite back. So a forward-thinking quiet word without anyone else being to hear them will nullify the audience and prevent them from having an opportunity to bite back. Just forward-looking. What you need from the student. Not what have they done, what you need from them going forward, so they have an achievable set of targets. Maybe that doesn't work. So then you've got to use on call. My advice on call, when you're using on call is usually your senior member staff, or maybe it's the head of year and so on and so forth, the pastoral support. Often on call can be used to palm off the disruptive student. And I can get there'll be situations where, do you know what? I understand you may just want them out. I get that. But if you want to build positive relationships, if you want it to mend itself, then use on call to support you to have the conversation with the pupil. So ask on call to stand in the room while you go and speak to people for a minute. And again, maybe now this is your final one-to-one where you say, this is the last chance now. I need you to do X, Y, Z. And if you don't, this is what's going to happen. And if you get the impression from the child that they're going to give it the best chance, let them have their best chance. If during that conversation, they still bite back, then I think that's when you say, you know what? Today's not the day. We're going to go again tomorrow. But for now, you're going to be removed, whatever the protocol is. And then when we're talking about following the protocol, you need to show them that you know the systems and that you apply them. But my advice is I think the behavior system should be used after clearly trying to get them to do the right thing. It's a last resort. It's a, look, I've tried. I have tried. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and yet still we've got an issue. You have now got the warning or the detention or the whatever it is in your school. But I think if you can dish out a sanction and simultaneously remind them of all the things you tried to do to support them, that child will go away thinking, you know what, Miss or Sir or whatever they call you, he did try, and it was on me. They did try, but it was on me. Finally, of course, involve parents and carers. And again, this is about taking ownership of your own classroom, taking ownership of your own learning space. When keeping parents informed should come from you. Meetings with parents should be you. You can, of course, use your head of year or the head of department to support, but you should lead. If the child sees that you are taking ownership, that can only boost the relationship between you two. It will only show the child that you're taking ownership for the space, and they'll start to build respect. They'll start to understand that what you say goes, and you're not just going to deflect to someone more senior. You are going to take ownership. And that comes with more confidence. That comes with experience. But if that's your aim, it can only stand you in good stead. Next, refuse to follow instructions. Again, not going to dwell on this one, but nullify the audience. You don't want to get into I'm going to give you an instruction across the room, because then they're going to refuse to follow your instruction back across the room. So nullify the audience with the quiet word. Any student that says you can't make me knows their rights and knows full well that physically we can't make them do things. We can ask them to do things. We can tell them to do things. We can't make them. So we need to think, what are we in control of? What we're in control of is outcomes. So then when you're dealing with a refusal to follow instructions, don't focus on telling them what you want them to do. Give them the choice. And then when we're talking about giving them the choice, each choice has its own respective outcome. You say to the child, you can either do this, which is a positive option, and then this will happen, which will be, again, a positive outcome. Or you can do this, which will be maybe refusal again. And this is what I'll do. I'll call your parents. I'll call on call. We'll have a meeting with the parents in school. I'll make sure I get the phone call done today. We'll arrange it for tomorrow morning. And then we're going to sit down. We're going to deal with it. If you get that imbalance of choices and outcomes, most of the time, students realize the best decision to make. But my advice here is focus on giving them the choice. Don't focus on telling them what to do, because then they just say no or they bite back. So instead you say you can do A or you can do B, but the outcomes for B are a whole lot worse than the outcomes for A. So make your choice. And this is the tone that I'd be saying it in. I'll keep it nice and calm, and I'll explain what I do given their choices. As I was saying before, that back and forth across the classroom, avoid that. It makes it seem like you're on a level playing field. We're not on a level playing field. I am the adult, you're the student. So I'm in control of outcomes if you don't follow my instructions. So I'm not going to get in a slanging match back and forth. You need to keep your own calm, you need to make sure your own resolve stays intact, and you make sure they're aware of what you are in control in, and that's the consequences of what will happen. So just repeat those and then stop getting into a back and forth about it. Tactically ignore if you can. And of course, the next bit is when things go wrong, there needs to be some sort of follow-up. And when we're talking about restorative conversations, these are conversations where maybe it's a one-on-one, maybe you've asked for support from their form tutor or their head of year or whatever else. But again, you want to be the person leading as best as possible. So get advice beforehand. If you're not sure about how to have these conversations, get advice beforehand. Or maybe can you sit and another teacher doing a restorative conversation you can observe, maybe. But here's my advice on restorative conversations. They are not, in my opinion, another opportunity to tell a child off. Restorative conversations are forward-looking and about restoring the relationship. They should be led by open questions. You're asking the child what happened. You're letting them speak. You're letting them explain what happened. And then, of course, you tell them your own side of it as well. Then by the end, you're hoping to make a bit of a trade. Doesn't need to be a 50-50 trade, but you need to explain to the child what we need from them in the subsequent lessons. But feel free to say, you know what? I'm going to do this for you instead. Or I then say, what do you need from me? Make it a two-way thing So they might feel like they've got an opportunity to ask something of you as a teacher. They might not take it up. They might say, I don't know, because they may have realized there were no excuse. But maybe they'd say, you know what, can you, I can't even think of an example, but they may ask something of you. And if you can give a little, then that shows them that you're trying to be reasonable as much as possible. But this is what I need from you. And if I don't see those things in subsequent lessons, this is what will happen. And you just outline it. And then you have to. The next is the acrimonious conversations outside the classroom, where things have gone wrong and you need to now have a conversation, or you're challenging the behavior and you know you need to take a more firm stance. The advice I'd give in this situation is, before you get into the conversation, set it up. Children love a back and forth. Children get reprimanded for answering back. So we need to try, and then you get in that back and forth about, don't answer me back. And they say, I didn't answer you back. And you say, now you're being rude. You want to avoid that. Best way to avoid that as much as possible is set the conversation up first, which means your decision as a teacher, who's going to speak first. You would either say, what's going to happen is I'm going to speak about what I've seen. You're not going to interrupt. And then after I've finished, you then have an opportunity to tell me your side. Or the way I like to do it, if I'm honest, is I let the child speak. But I say things like, you need to speak, you need to explain what's happened, but it needs to be respectful and it needs to be polite, it needs to calm. If they're not ready to do that, maybe now's not the time to have the conversation. If they're going to talk to you respectfully, if they're not going to talk to you respectfully, then maybe now's not the time. And you hold that line. But you set it up. You tell them they're going to have an opportunity to speak. You tell them how you need them to speak, because we need mutual respect. And then you have the conversation in that way. And then if they interject while you're speaking, you remind them of what you agreed beforehand. Don't have to reprimand them saying, don't ask me back. You say, remember, we agreed and you were happy that I will speak and then you will speak. And then if they can't handle that, then you cut the conversation and you use your systems and you get more support. But my advice is set it up before. Don't get caught in a answering back and forth. One thing during these conversations is be aware of your own volume, your own tone, your body language, your proximity. As an adult, although we see these teenagers as being very uppity and everything else, if you're too close, you can give across the wrong impression. So be aware of your own body language, open body language, not closed body language. Be aware of your own volume, nice and calm. Be aware of your tone, nice and relaxed. I'm not fazed by this. I need you to do X, Y, Z. If they see that you're getting a bit flustered, then that may spur them on a little bit. But nice and calm, I'm in control. We're going to do it this way. If not, then this is going to happen. And if they don't follow instructions, then this is going to happen. And then you follow through. But be aware of your own language, your own tone. De-escalate it with your tone. And if you don't think you're ready to have the conversation because you're not calm yourself, then don't put yourself in that situation yet. Do it when you're ready and you're nice and composed. And if that's in the next lesson, if that's separate, if that's after the lesson, then do it then. When you have these conversations, make sure they are forward-looking. We know things have gone wrong. They know things have gone wrong. It's about, what are we going to do next? How are we going to enhance your progress? Forward-looking. I've spoken about the use of on-call. I see Mr. Rogers come back on the screen. I've spoken about use of on-call. And the final one is about disruption of multiple pupils. I'm going to put them on the screen so that you can see them, because maybe you can take a little screenshot. When you've got multiple pupils, anonymous, whole class firm but calm. Resetting of expectations. Amplify and praise those doing it correctly. I've spoken about nullifying the audience. I've spoken about using the behavior system after you've tried to get them to do the right thing. And if you need to scapegoat, then scapegoat. Final bit here. Although I've spoken about all the different strategies, the best behavior management is consistently good teaching and positive relationships, in my opinion. And as you progress in your career, you will get better at being a consistently good teacher, which means behavior management will just come with it. And then, but the one thing you can focus on from the outset is building those positive relationships. My information is there, and thank you very much for listening.
Khalil, well done, mate. Loving that. Absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much. I'm sure people are going to get a huge amount of that. If anybody wants to watch any of this back on the recording, just go to teachmeeticons.com. You can sign up for free for the recording. And yeah, you can watch it on the website. which will be available probably a few hours after we finish with this today. Khalil, absolute legend. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Okay, that was Khalil. We've now got Sabrina. Sabrina, good morning.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Thanks. Thanks for having me for your event today too. Yeah, no, it's our pleasure. I was actually sat watching Khalil and thinking, yeah, this is actually really important for experienced teachers to have a refresher. I'm starting at a new school in September, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to have to start building those relationships from scratch again and making sure that I'm always being really
you lucky person. Thank you, and thanks so much for sponsoring. Obviously, all our events are free. They wouldn't be free without your support, Pupil Progress, all our other sponsors who enable us to do what we do, and obviously all our speakers who for our online events give up their time like they have today to give such fantastic talks. So
that's very generous.
Sabrina, let's hear more about Teachers Love Stationery. I'm going to hand over to you now for a few minutes so we can hear a bit more.
Great. Thank you very much. So hi, my name's Sabrina. I'm the co-founder and co-owner at Teachers Love Stationery Club. And we are a stationery company who retail online. We also have subscription boxes. And we make sure that all of our products are aimed at teachers. So they're stuff that, you know, they're kind of, some of it's a bit quirky, some of it's a bit different and fun, but it's always reasonably priced for teachers and aimed at stuff that teachers would actually use and use in the classroom or use up for themselves or use at home just to brighten up your day a bit or to make your work a bit more pretty and fun, which I kind of like making my planner look nice. But I'm going to start off with one of our subscription boxes. And we have monthly, bi-monthly or quarterly options available if you'd like to subscribe. Our boxes are 2 centimeters thick, roughly like this one, and about A4 size. So when they come, if you're at work, you aren't going to miss it. It'll fit through your letterbox. So the particular box I'm showing you today is our afternoon tea box. And when you first subscribe, you get your own personalised pencil case with a nice little glittery star on it. And for this particular month, we included some little notelets, 2 little packets of notelets with a little cake on it. 3 pens scented for the theme of the box. So we've got a vanilla scented, baked cookie scent and milk tea scented pens. Little notebook with a themed cover, and it's a dot grid notebook, but I don't know if you can really see that. And we also have, generally we try to include a little teacher treat. So as well as a silver highlighter and some washi tape and some lovely little stickers. My pupils like these as reward stickers, and they stick them on the front of their book, and they like to decorate the front of their book and see how many they can get. Because we often include little vinyl stickers. And as I mentioned, we like to include a little treat for the teachers. So this is for you to have at break time. We've got a little coconut ring cake and a nice tea bag for you to have a little treat, maybe in the school day. And we also often include reward stickers. So these ones say your work is quality on them. Everyone likes a terrible pun. So yeah, do consider subscribing to our boxes. They are $12.49 each. And obviously, depending on which package you choose, it'll obviously be monthly, bi-monthly or quarterly. You'll be charged $12.49, delivered straight to you, and you get a lovely fresh batch of stationery that you can use to use in your classroom or use on your planner or just use for yourself. Anyway, so talking about planners, we've also released our new range of teacher planners. We have a panel of teachers from different backgrounds and different phases of teaching, and they came together to tell us what they wanted from a planner. So we've got 6 different designs, and I'm showing you the rosé marble one here. There's also an orchid one, a cherry blossom one, a geometric triangle pattern one, and 2 other designs. We have a leaf design and a galaxy swirl design. So this is what our teachers said they wanted from planners. We've got a little internal pocket here for spare bits of paper, or if you were to buy the matching accessory pack, little notebook could fit in there as well. Got a little bit of information about ourselves. Starts off with a few pages of personal info, timetable pages, and calendars and long-term planning. So we've got monthly planning pages, so you've got your month overviews, 12 of those. There's then sections for writing notes as well. So we've got Cornell note style pages, as well as traditional lined notes pages. And then, of course, your main planner section. Now, our planner comes in either week per double spread, which is what I'm showing you here, or a day per page. And lastly, assessment pages at the back. So quite often when you buy a teacher planner, they can be quite heavy and bulky and thick and have a lot of pages that you don't use and you wish you had a bigger notes section. But our planner, and so I'm going to take out the notebook here, it's fairly thin compared to other planners, even though it's still got everything you need in there, no extra bits that you probably won't use. And as I mentioned, we've got matching accessory packs. So we've got a notebook and a to-do list, and each one is available in every theme that we have available, as well as decorative stickers and washi tape. So again, all of these items are available to match all the different types of planners that we do. Prices start from £20 for the planner if you go for week per double spread. The matching accessory pack is £10. And if you went for page per view, that is £22.50. So the most you will ever pay for our planners plus all the matching accessories, £32.50. And we've got a code on screen for you, ECT10, which means you'll get a 10% discount across our online store. Lots of other bits in there, like my favourite erasable pens, or different coloured pen packs and so forth. So please do check out our website, see if there's anything there that takes your fancy, and please feel free to use the 10% off code.
Thank you, Sabrina. Absolutely amazing. Thank you for joining us live as well and for demoing a box and the planner. They look fantastic. So
Lovely.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Cheers.
very much then, Tom. See you.
Speak to you soon. Talk.
Cheers. Bye.
That was Sabrina. Sobia, good morning. Sorry, we're slightly behind. We're about 10 minutes behind.
That's okay. I'm hoping everyone's okay because I had a late night last night, so I'm ready, but not sure how it's going to pan out. But I'm ready.
Your session title is The Subtle Art of Managing Up.
Yes,
so
that's right.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about that and what that means and what your the subtle art of managing up is. So let me put your presentation on screen. If you want to go full screen on that, that would be brilliant. Hopefully you can. And yeah, when you're ready, go full screen.
Is it okay if I leave it like this because I'm looking at another
screen?
If you want. Is that okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. It should be fine. I mean, we can see it. It's all good. So I'll take it away.
Great. Right. Thank you very much for inviting me onto this session because I am looking forward to it. When I was a NQT a very long time ago, we had teacher training on behaviour management. We had it on SEND and curriculum, teaching and learning. But what we didn't have it on was leadership skills and how to deal with people. And I think I struggled when I was a younger teacher. And the reason why I struggled was because I'm quite conscientious, hardworking, and I take people at face value. And sometimes I forget that we are made up of a world of lots of different people, and we are building relationships and managing with lots of different types of people on a regular basis. And so I did a bit of soul searching when I was younger. Then I ended up taking some coaching courses, and this is a shout out to some of the coaches that I've worked with. Diana Asagi, for example, fantastic. They helped me to kind of think about things in a different way, in a more strategic and leadership way. And I think as an ECT, a lot of ECTs that are coming in these days are going and getting promoted straight away. I got promoted within the first year, and I'm expecting other ECTs for that to be happening to them as well. So I'm a subject leader for business studies at the moment. I teach both secondary and sixth form. I'm also a Google educator and trainer and an EdTech lead. And today I'm going to be focusing on a key aspect, which is that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Now, when you come into the education profession as an ECT, there are going to be some leaders and managers who are really, really fantastic. And there are going to be some leaders and managers who aren't so good. And when I was younger, I used to have a real pet peeve about this because I was quite conscientious. I wanted to do well. And I assumed that the people that were leading me would be better than me. And in some cases they were, because I learned from some phenomenal leaders. But in some cases and in some organizations, they weren't quite so great. So you've got to remember, they've come up through the system as well, these leaders and managers who aren't so good. And you've got to think about the way that they've been trained as well. And sometimes you have to go down to a human level and remember that sometimes there may be leaders or managers who you work with who may be insecure. They may be new to their role, or they may be feeling fearful or vulnerable with some of the work that they've been asked to do. Now, that's no excuse for poor management, but we do have leaders within the profession who aren't leading in the best way or in the most effective way that they possibly can. And as a result, when I was younger, where I felt that I wasn't learning anything anymore, and where I did have managers who weren't fantastic, I ended up leaving. And probably ended up leaving earlier than I should have as well. And so I look back now and I think if only I had the skills in order to deal with those types of people, I probably would have had more of a career path that was quite straighter than what it has been. So when people are leading, sometimes you get leaders and managers who end up micromanaging you. And at first I used to think it was because they were a control freak, because, I've done it myself in the past for certain projects. But I realized that it's due to lack of confidence and fear. And so you need to really think about the person that you're dealing with and understand from their point of view that they're actually a bit fearful about what they're doing, and they might not be 100% sure either. So in that situation, whenever I have been in that situation, I've thought about my own behavior, my own actions and my own attitudes, because one of the things that I've realized in my long journey is that you can't change other people. And so you have to change the way you relate to them. And unfortunately, as a young teacher, you can't keep moving from job to job either, because it doesn't look good for your career history or your CV. And so after having worked in a lot of schools, doing supply teaching and permanent roles as well, I have come to the conclusion that whichever organization you go in, the same sort of things do play out in terms of politics and organizational agendas and the types of people that you will meet as well. There'll always be the same sort of characters wherever you go. So then I was introduced to an idea of something called managing up. So managing up, what does it mean to you? Well, to me, it means that you're consciously working for the mutual benefit of you and your manager or your boss. So that could be your head teacher as well. It doesn't mean avoiding work. It doesn't mean rebelling. It doesn't mean kissing up, or even in some cases trying to outsmart them, because sometimes when you are in an organization, there's lots of different factors at play. But what you need to do is you need to really place yourself into your boss's shoes and understand the position that your boss is in and the requirements, and making yourself known to be a great employee by exceeding expectations and the needs that they're looking for. So I've heard a couple of people say in the past to me, colleagues and stuff, oh, that person's sucking up. It's not actually sucking up. You're actually supporting your manager's success and making them look good. And in turn, that will help you in your career as well. So for example, as a young teacher, when I was an NQT, I was always assigned either work or CPD, and I was asked to do an activity. But with the not so great leaders, I never had any guidance given. I never had any expectations of what they were looking for. And I never had any examples of what success is. And that can be quite hard sometimes, because you're essentially being asked to do things on your own without knowing what's going on. So then that's when this subtle art of managing up comes in. Because essentially what you're going to do is you're going to work with your manager or your leader and get them to do the things that you need in order to do your job properly. So the subtle art of managing up essentially means being the most effective employee you can be and creating value for your manager and your company. You're working above and beyond the tasks that have been assigned so that you can enhance your manager's work, as well as understand what you should be doing as well. So let's go into this a bit more detail. What are the benefits? Well, we've discussed this already. The benefits are for you, your manager, and the school. Okay, and it's not also a manipulation tactic, because I have seen in some organizations where people use it in a different way, and that's not what we're here about. We're here about making sure that it benefits everybody, because you are a team, you are supposed to be collaborating, and this isn't supposed to be an individual effort either. It's about working efficiently with your boss and understanding and you understanding how to work properly together. So you're communicating well with your boss and doing your job in a way that makes their job easier as well. And sometimes that can be hard to do. When you're in a professional environment, it could be hard to go up to your boss or your line manager and say to them, I don't actually understand what you're asking me to do, or is this how you wanted it? Because they assume that they've communicated in the correct way. And sometimes that's not the case. So when you want to either advance your career or you want to be seen in a certain light, you need to have the respect and confidence of your bosses, and you need to make sure that you stand out as a valuable asset so that you're reliable, thoughtful, and your work quality is good as well. So how do you start managing up? Well, when I was a young NQT, as I said earlier, I got promoted within the space of a year. And I remember quite clearly it wasn't my direct line manager, it was somebody else who was leading me as well at the time. So we had we had line managers, and we also had people that were mentoring us on the side as well. And that mentor said to me that I needed to start thinking about how the department works, rather than just focusing on my teaching and my classes only. Start thinking about what your department does and how it relates to the rest of the school. So thinking about the big picture. Also start thinking about how the school works, the policies, the systems, the procedures, the processes. What is it that makes your organizational successful? Which people do you go to for certain things? Which people have control over certain parts that you need to make sure that are being worked properly? For example, if you need something in your department, who do you go to and how do you resolve those issues? So you need to understand not only your department, but your organization. And you also need to understand what obstacles you may face as well. Now, whilst you're doing that, you're going to end up stepping on people's toes. And it's really important that you're very careful in the way that you deal with people. As I said before, working in schools is all about relationships, and you need to ensure that you're not standing on anyone's toes, and you also make sure that you're not taking over your manager's responsibilities. And I think that's really important, because when I was a young leader, I ended up taking some of the workload of my managers, and I realized that there was a difference between delegation, what they should have been doing appropriately, and somebody just passing work off to me. And so it's really important as a young teacher for you to understand where to draw the line. So the best way you can do that is to think about your manager and the way that they are. Don't tell them what to do, okay, because that can be quite rude. And in a sense, you're also undermining them, because it makes them feel like you don't respect them, even though that they have got the position that they're in. So what you need to do is educate rather than intimidate the people that you're working with. So strive to create an open dialogue with your boss, share your ideas, get to know who they are and what's important to them. So you need to think about their values, you need to think about what they're looking for, think about asking them what successes led to their current role? What is their vision in terms of moving forward for the school or for the department, depending on which leader it is? What do they struggle with? What might you be able to help them fulfill? Have a look at where the gaps are. What can you do to support the school or the leader that you're working with? So when you're looking at managers' expectations, you need to think about what your manager will expect of you. And there's a little bit of emotional intelligence that goes here. And again, when I was younger, I was very headstrong. And I think sometimes I can still be a bit headstrong, but I think I'm more emotionally intelligent than I used to be. One of the things you have to remember is that you're working in a team. And team success is more important than individual success, because in schools, you need to be able to be working with everybody. Another thing that's important is to take initiative and lead on things. Nobody's going to come up to you and say to you, you know, can you do this? Can you do that? You need to kind of put yourself forward for things, especially if you have the intention of moving up the career ladder, if that's something you wish to do. If you just wish to be a teacher, again, nominate yourself for things that you enjoy, because that will give you a lot of experience. And also it will open up your confidence, and it will make you it will help you create more relationships with people around the school as well. You'll eventually get to a stage where you're developing your own people. Now, whether that's because you become a manager, or whether that's because you are looking after somebody. So, for example, some of you might end up training teachers, you know, PGCE students who come into your schools. You need to learn how to develop those people as well. So you need to understand what's expected of you from your manager, so that you can pass and relay that information down to the people that you're working with as well. Your manager's going to expect you to stay current. So they're going to want you to be up to date with your subject knowledge and teaching and learning, best practice. That means that sometimes, and we all know this, when we go into schools, CPD sometimes is not fantastic. So it's going to be your responsibility to make sure you're up to date with your own professional development, and, you know, to find CPD where you can, that's good quality as well. And essentially, you're going to be driving your own growth. So there will be some mentors and leaders who will be fantastic, and they'll be, you know, guiding you every step of the way. You can observe them, you can work with them, they'll train you properly. But then there'll be some managers that you won't be able to have those interactions with. And so it's really important for you to own your own growth, and also be a player for all seasons. Your manager's going to expect you to be flexible. When I was a younger teacher, there was one school that I worked in that required constant change. And I remember one of my managers misinterpreting my actions because she thought I wasn't being flexible enough. And it wasn't that I wasn't flexible, it's that I didn't agree with her values or her vision. And I didn't agree with some of the activities she was asking me to do, because I had had experience that was more than hers. And I look back at that now, and for a long time I was angry, I guess, because I thought maybe she didn't understand me, or maybe she wasn't listening. And then I realized it wasn't anything to do with that. It was my fault, because what I should have done is what's on the other side of the slide, is I should have understood my manager. And I should have understood what their values were, and then try to explain what my values were, so that they knew where I was coming from. And I should have demonstrated flexibility in the places that I was able to demonstrate flexibility. That doesn't mean I was a pushover or I become a pushover. It means that just make sure you stand for the things that are important, but don't move on the things that aren't. So it's a case of choosing your battles wisely. And I think that's probably been my biggest learning curve within education, that you have to learn to choose your battles wisely. Otherwise, you can end up distressed over a lot of things, because there are lots of different agendas being placed in schools by lots of different people and lots of different stakeholders. So you have to just manage that yourself. You have to recognize the people that you get along with. So you have to recognize the managers and the leaders that you are who have similar values and thinking to you, and make sure you keep relationships with those people. So if you're unable to get through to your own manager and your own boss, you can work alongside them, and knowing what their expectations are as well. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things is to build trust. With any relationship, it's important for you to have an understanding with the person that you're working with. And I think sometimes building trust doesn't come naturally, especially if you've worked in an organization and the previous person that you've worked in has destroyed your trust as well. So it can be quite, if you're a leader, a middle leader, or, you know, if you're in a position of responsibility, so you might be an ECT with, you might come into responsibility within the next year or so, and you might be responsible for, you know, some younger teachers. You need to think about what your manager's needs are and act accordingly. And you need to actually build that relationship and trust between you. So one of the things that you could do is ask some questions when you're having, you know, when you're having line management meetings, or even casually when you're talking to them. Ask them what's on top of their mind right now. Ask them what kind of things they can accomplish, what they're trying to accomplish in the organization. What do they value the most, personally, professionally? Think about their performance. How is their performance measured? What targets need to be met? What's their definition of success? What can you do to make their lives easier? Think about how you can make your decisions from your point of view to kind of help your boss or your line manager you know, carry out their roles effectively as well. Now, I've got loads of questions that you could possibly ask, and I'm not going to go through all of them because I know that time is limited. But if anyone does want those questions, I can tweet them out and I can post them up about the kind of questions that you can ask. Some of the things that you need to think about when you're asking is when you're having those conversations, you know, make sure you're being genuine. So you could use something along the lines of, you know, I want to make great impact here, but I'm new to XYZ, and I know you have a lot of experience that I can benefit from learning from. So is it possible to arrange some time to ask you questions about your past experiences, your current goals? Or maybe ask them, how does it work better for you? Should I send you weekly emails or updates about my projects? Would you like to talk about them in a staff meeting? Always ask your manager how to communicate with them, because it will make your life easier as well. Now, sometimes there'll be an emergency in an organization, and I have been in this situation when you end up firefighting lots of different things, and that firefighting isn't something that's just a one-day event. That firefighting can go on for 6 months or possibly a year, and in some cases, if you're in a toxic organization, it can go on for a lot longer. You need to be able to pitch in and support your leader to try and find out where the problems are and what you can do to support them, especially if you can see they're overwhelmed. Now, let me give you an example of this. One of the things that happened is COVID recently, and a lot of head teachers have been struggling. And I know within my own school and organization that my leaders, it has been quite difficult for them. And so where I've been able to support them as best as I can by offering to do certain things. But then at the same time, looking after myself as well and my needs, I've also said that, no, I'm not able to do this at this time. But if you ask me about in 2 weeks' time, maybe I can fit it in then. You need to have the confidence to have those conversations. When you're an ECT, you don't necessarily have that confidence because you're new and you want to do really, really well. But one of the things that you have to remember is that you don't want to burn out too early. And I'm sure you've heard this before from lots of experienced leaders, that when they became teachers, there is a tendency for you to want to do everything and showcase how good you are and take on your manager's work and, you know, show that you're a team player. But you don't want to do it to the detriment of yourself where you actually burn out. So please make sure you keep in mind how you're looking after your own health and well-being as well, and say no when you need to. And I think there was somebody earlier who did a presentation on how to say no as well. Now, I've had instances, and I'm pretty sure some of my experienced colleagues on the show today can understand what happens when when a leader says, "I asked you to do X, Y, Z," but they didn't actually tell you how to do it, or they're not going to give you straight instructions. So, as an employee, you need to make sure that you're confident enough to follow directions when needed, but also ask clarifying questions, because there may be a tendency for somebody to turn around and say, well, I didn't say that. That's not what I meant. That's not what I was looking for. And that can be quite hard to deal with, those kind of personalities. And as much as I'd like to think that everybody, is working for the benefit of the students and the staff, sometimes you will get people who are only interested in themselves. So you need to make sure that you ask clarifying questions about why certain things are needed, how it should be done, what they're looking for, and make sure you understand the goal and the timeline of the project that you're involved in as well. But make sure you ask tactfully. Don't just go, don't go strolling into someone's office and say, well, what did you mean by that? You need to be very, very tactful in the way that you speak to your leader.
Sobia, 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. And just make sure you also ask questions before you express disagreement as well. Now, some of the things that I don't want you to do is don't manipulate, because sometimes some people will try to manipulate and they get involved in office politics. Don't be a disingenuous yes man, okay? Do not do that, because your colleagues won't support you. Your leaders will be able to see through it, and it won't work with relationship management at all. So please don't show favoritism. Don't ally with certain types of people. Make sure you are professional at all times. I'm just going to quickly move on and just say that what I would like you to do, because I've only got a short amount of time, I want you to, after leaving this session, think of a problem you currently have at work. Think about how you can change this into an opportunity. Think about what your manager's top priorities are. And I want you to then think about what actions that you can take further with you to ensure that you actually learn how to manage up and you make your work life effective, as well as your leader's work life effective as well. And that will kind of take the pressure off you as well. So
5 seconds.
Just to finish up. Okay, just to finish off, know what's important to your boss and what their goals are. Ask questions, develop empathy as a leadership skill, give early warning of potential problems to your leaders, anticipate their likely response, keep a paper trail, and know when your boss is most responsive, and understand emotional intelligence as well. I'm going to stop there because we haven't got enough time, but make sure you keep your heart in the right place, strive to enhance the workplace and support your leaders rather than manipulate your leaders. And if there are any questions, feel free to tweet me, feel free to message in. I've gone through that last session very quickly, but I apologize because I have run over time.
Thanks, Sobia. Fantastic. Thanks very much. Sorry I can't talk to you about it much. So I'll talk to you later about it, but thanks very much indeed. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, Bex.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for speaking today. I'm going to literally not waste any time. I'm just going to hand straight over to you. You can introduce yourself and what you're going to be talking about today.
Are you open to my... that's the one. Lovely. Okay, so today I'm talking about engaging with CPD beyond your school without getting overwhelmed. So let me just make sure I can move my slides. Yeah, okay, so to give you a brief overview, my plan is to first make some suggestions of where to find CPD resources. Once I've introduced you to the kind of treasure trove that's out there, I'll talk you through how to go about selecting what to engage with. The next bit is to consider how to apply what you've learned to your everyday practice, because all too often it's not the case. And finally, we'll talk about the importance of reflecting on your CPD and evaluating the impact it's had on your practice. So gone are the days, I think, where CPD just meant rocking up to a course at a nice hotel with a nice lunch. In fact, I've not been to one of those since my first year of teaching. So whilst whole staff inset days in the school hall are very, very much their thing, I don't think they are the core of what CPD is anymore. I feel, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this, that CPD can be much more self-directed these days than it has been before. The growth of teacher social media, the rise and to extent a kind of full now of blogging, the range of webinars, conferences, other events available, as well as books and podcasts mean you've got a whole lot at your fingertips. Now, the issue with this, of course, is that there's just too much out there to make the most of all of it. And that is absolutely fine. We don't need to do it all. And the important thing is to find what works for you. So my first example today is books, blogs, and articles. Reading is a great way to engage with CPD, and there's so much out there to choose from. It's really easy, though, to feel like you need to read it all, and you really, really don't. Absolutely no one is, even if they are giving the impression across all social media channels that they are. You won't get anything meaningful from it if you just try to read absolutely everything. And we'll come back later to how to pick what to read. So for now, I'll just focus on what some of your options are. So for keeping up to date with what's going on in education in general, of course, you've got publications such as the TES. This is a good option for keeping up with national policy changes, trends, news-related things, really. For engaging with shorter pieces, but rooted in research, you might pick something like Impact from the Chartered College of Teaching, some blogs from organisations like the Research Schools Network and Inner Drive, or guidance reports and short summaries from the Education Endowment Foundation. There are, of course, a number of teachers on Twitter too who write very good blogs, and these are often research informed. Finally, of course, there are books. These will tend to be longer, more in-depth and on a particular topic. And there are lots of teacher authors out there right now, so you can read with confidence that they're based on not only research, but practice in the classroom too. So whilst I mentioned earlier that one-day courses are no longer really the focus of CPD, that doesn't mean that one-off events aren't to be bothered with. So there's a number of different types of events out there, depending on what you're interested in. Teachmeet Icons, who are responsible for today's event, also organise face-to-face events. And much like today, you hear from a range of teachers talking about their experience and ideas. You might also hear about Teachmeets organised by schools, networks or trusts, where teachers typically share an idea for around 5 minutes or so. And these can be great for hearing a wide range of ideas in a short period of time. But I'll talk a bit later about the dangers of this if you aren't careful. Another example on the screen is a Brewed event. I haven't seen these going on very often recently because of the pandemic, but they're informal events, usually in a pub or similar venue with a range of talks by different teachers. And there are events like Research Ects. Started as a national conference, the Research Ects network has now grown to have lots and lots of regional events. These tend to be very big with a whole massive timetable of sessions to choose from. Many, or maybe even most, I'm not sure, are led by teachers, some academics and researchers and others related to education in different ways. And these events have so much to take in, so of course come with the same warning as I mentioned before about having too much. So over the last 2 or 3 years, the selection of podcasts related to teaching has seen some real growth. Not only that, but there's live radio such as Teachers Talk Radio to check out as well. So depending on what you want to listen to, there are interview formats, those with more than one host, some that are regular, others more sporadic, and even some that you can get involved with yourself. Personally, I find this great on my commute to work, but I balance them out with my non-teaching favourites too. So I think we're really lucky to be teaching at a time where there's such a wide variety of choice, and that CPD doesn't need to mean a one-day expensive course anymore. And the main issue, though, is how to pick what to engage with. It would be very easy to get sucked into feeling as if you should read every book and blog, subscribe to every podcast, be at events every weekend, but I can assure you that doing that would help your development and enjoyment far less than by making carefully considered selections. So there are a number of lenses through which you would select your CPD. Firstly, there's your current development goals. What are you currently working on yourself? Has something been identified in an observation? Have you had a conversation with a colleague recently that's made you consider something? Is there a specific area of your practice you know you want to improve? Pick activities which are going to fit in with this. Next is your aspirations. Do you have something in mind that you'd like to do in the future? Are you interested in a particular pathway or goal later in your career? It's absolutely fine to tune into some of that now to help you find a bit more and help you kind of develop yourself in that way. And finally, it's 100% okay just to engage with CPD activities out of general interest and enjoyment. It might be that you're opening your eyes to different ideas, getting to hear from or meet different people, or just having a chance to generally be a bit of an edgy geek. It doesn't especially matter why you're picking specific CPD activities, as long as there's some reason other than feeling like you should or ticking a box to say that you have. So something I always mention when I'm talking about CPD is that it should always equip you with the knowledge behind the strategy, not just the strategy itself. So what I mean by this is that you shouldn't leave with just a list of great activities to try. You should know why those specific strategies are the ones you should try and what it is about them which makes them work. Now, yes, of course, this is more work, not only for the presenter to explain, but also for you to take on board. But it really is necessary for making sure that it's going to have the desired impact in the classroom. Now, this is the reason that I say it's important to know the why. Although it might feel great to leave an event buzzing with loads of new ideas, they might have been subject to what's known as a lethal mutation. That's to say that it's been passed around from teacher to teacher, each time losing part of what made it effective in the first place. So as Zoe and Mark Ects write in their book, The CPD Curriculum, all too often it's the case that the what has been followed, but without an understanding of the why. And so the strategy fails and becomes yet another tale of how CPD is a waste of teachers' time. They do also note the following. We do, of course, learn from experience. We work out, through trial and error, effective ways of teaching particular topics. However, we can sometimes be poor judges of what is working and what is not, and even poorer judges of what might work better. Experience alone may make us better at what we do, but it does not make us better at all that is possible. So just in case you aren't convinced yet, the guidance report on effective professional development from the Education Endowment Foundation says basically the same. They state that effective professional development needs to build knowledge, motivate staff, develop teaching techniques, and be embedded into practice. And missing one or more of these elements can mean that CPD fails, as either you don't understand it or it doesn't become part of your practice. All this, of course, is no use if we don't know how to go about applying it to our practice. And as David Weston once said at a research ed event I attended, and I no doubt many times before and since, saying a conference or a CPD event is great development is like saying a shopping trip is a good meal. It's what you do when you come back that counts. So the steps I'm going to talk about for applying what you've learned to your practice are slightly adapted from the pictured EEF report. The report was aimed at school leaders and whole school improvement, but these steps make sense when applied to changes in your own classroom practice. So we've dealt with this first part already. You've selected the right CPD for you, and we're off to a good start. Now, the next thing is to remember that implementing something new to your practice is a process. It's not just a one-off event. You won't just go and put this new thing into your Monday period 1 lesson and boom, problem solved. Think about when, where, and with who you want to make this change. Even if it's something you'd like to change for all year groups, maybe just pick one class to start off with. Plan it in your lesson for the first time, and remember it's better to take things in small steps, so break it down if you need to. Here's the key though. You need to monitor your progress and make changes over time. It's more than possible that this will need adapting to suit you and your classes. It might be that you have to rethink how you go about it if it went wrong the first time. It might just be that it doesn't feel quite right. This is where it's important to check the impact of the change that you've made. It's all well and good trying something new, but you need to see if it's had the effect that you were after. Whether that's that your life's been made easier in some way, students are remembering something better, can tackle a task better, or they're getting better test scores. You just need to be sure. So once you've been doing this new thing for a while, check out that it's working. If so, great. If not, make some changes. Just remember to refer back to what you learned in the first place so you aren't behind one of those lethal mutations. This is why it's so important not to be trying too many new things at once. You're just not going to be successful with them, as you won't be able to keep all of those plates spinning. There are different ways you might choose to reflect on your practice. You just need to pick a way that works for you. The process of reflection gives you a chance to really consider what you've learned, what's working, and what your next steps are. When I was trained to teach, I wrote blogs all the time, reflecting on what I was learning and doing. I found it a really useful thing to do, and I wasn't really bothered if anybody else read them, but often they did, and it was great when something I'd written resonated with someone else. You might discuss things with a colleague face-to-face or share your thoughts via social media. Both Twitter and also Instagram are now very popular with teachers. And finally, you might prefer a traditional pen and paper. There's nothing like it for getting thoughts down. And in fact, I've been working on a journal recently as I felt it was something missing on the teacher stationery market. I can't wait to use it and for others to be able to get their hands on a copy. And in fact, they arrived this morning, so I'm really excited. I've got them sat here on the desk next to me. So my key messages, I think I might have gone quite quickly here, Tom, so I might get us back on track a little bit. My key messages to you are, don't try and do everything. It's much better to do less in more depth. Remember, you need to know the why and not just a list of activities to pop into a lesson. Consider the process of applying these changes to your practice. It won't be instant. And always monitor, evaluate, reflect, and make changes. So I hope something I've said today has been of interest or of use. I'm happy to take any questions, and my contact details are on the screen. And I look forward to seeing the remaining presentations for today.
Spot on, Bex. Absolutely fantastic, as always. So thank you very much. And I don't know how your attention to detail on these presentations is something else.
I just enjoy Canva. I think that's
but you put me to shame because if I tried to do that, it'd probably take me a day to get it as in so like the attention to detail that you have. So fair play. So is there any way, can we get that presentation from somewhere?
Yeah, I will stick it on my blog. So that link there, learninglinguist.co.uk, I'll put it up there later. In fact, I might sit and do it now whilst I'm listening to the next presentation.
Super, because it is really good if people want to get it. All right, cheers, Bex. Thanks very much indeed, and speak to you soon. Thanks for doing it. Bye. Okay, that was Bex. We've now got Catherine. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Can you see my slides yet, or do I need to do something fancy?
I can now.
Aha, beautiful. Thank you. Do you want to have a chat beforehand, seeing as you're now?
Well, yes. We've saved a bit of time, haven't we, somehow? But yeah, no, I was just going to ask you, what you're talking about today, but it's on the screen. A lesson is the wrong unit for learning. You've got your introduction there. So no, I might ask a question at the end, but I'm going to let you crack on for now. We've got one more presentation after this, which is Jake. Really looking forward to that one to finish off. So fire away.
Lovely. Hi guys. So I'm Catherine Darwin. I'm associate lead teacher for maths at the moment at Manacroft Academy in Dewsbury. So I apologise that quite a bit of kind of the second half of this might be quite maths heavy in relation to my work with the Maths Hub. But actually I do think the ideas in it are still really applicable across the entirety of the curriculum. These will appear back at the end again. So if you want to get in touch with me about anything I've said or just teaching in general, I'm more than happy to talk about it. I'm a massive teaching and learning geek. So you're more than welcome to get me on my email, or I'm basically attached to my teacher Twitter at all times. So you'll be able to get me there as well. So today I want to talk about the lesson being the wrong unit for learning. I'm going to kind of do a bit of a roundabout tour of that, starting with what learning really is, and then we'll talk about how we can kind of move away from this kind of lesson as a unit, which I think is something that particularly in your PGCE, it's something that you get taught is kind of the key, that planning of a lesson. So we've got, to start off with, this idea that learning is a change in long-term memory. So this came from lots of different sources, but primarily from researchers of cognitive load theory. And I think Bex has just suggested Dan Willingham's book, Why Don't Students Like School, which is absolutely brilliant. And it comes up with this really simple model of the memory, taking things that are in the environment, bringing them into working memory, and then trying to make sure that the learning happens to bring those back into the long-term memory, and then bring them back in to be able to work with them on a daily basis. And I think for me, this is really key, because quite often as an ECT, I was thinking about what I was doing in a lesson as opposed to what the students were learning from me in those kind of sessions that I had with them. So this really helped me to reframe what it is that I was trying to do. It's all about making sure that everything is in that long-term memory for me. One of the most useful kind of models for this that I've seen kind of for that effective teaching is Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction. If you're interested, there's a lovely kind of guide that was written by Tom Sherrington about this a few years ago. And there's now a workbook and loads of stuff on YouTube to kind of work along and learn more about this. But he put this into 4 different sections. So those 4 different sections are really important within their own right, but this is the one that I'm really going to be thinking about today. This kind of sequencing of concepts is really, really core for me. Sam Twistleton is a professor at the Sheffield Hallam University. She talks quite often about teacher development, because that's her role. She talks about ECTs and ITT in particular. Her research talked about 3 different roles of a teacher, and for me, these are a progression over time. Initially, you think of yourself as a task manager. So particularly for me in my PGCE year, I was thinking, what on earth am I doing in this classroom? How is it that I keep control? How is it that I keep these students busy for this hour? Which is kind of your main concern when you first start teaching, along with the behavior, I think. What is it that you're going to do yourself to make sure that this hour is not chaos? I then quickly moved from that to kind of curriculum deliverer in my first few years of teaching. So what is it that I've taught? Now, I'm using taught very loosely here. There's a lovely cartoon that says someone taught their dog to whistle. And then they ask the dog to whistle. The dog doesn't whistle. And the person says, well, I thought you taught your dog to whistle. He said, well, yes, I thought I taught him it, but I didn't say that he'd learned it. And I think that's a massive kind of distinction for me, the difference between what you've taught and what the students have actually learned. And as a curriculum deliverer, you're not really thinking about the learning at that point. You're just thinking about getting through the content. Maybe the students need to remember it and you're trying to test that, but you're not really hugely bothered whether they've really learned it. It's just a memory test. And then you move towards being a concept or a skill builder, which is the point at which you're thinking, what have the students learned? How have I helped them to make connections? What have they been thinking about in my lessons? And how do I build that picture of my subject over time? Because learning is so difficult to see with it being a long-term change in memory, lots of people use really poor proxies for what learning looks like. So if somebody asked you to talk about what happened in a classroom that made it look successful, they'd probably say lots of things like this from the research from Professor Rob Coe. So they say things like, the students are busy, there's loads of work being done, they're really engaged, they're interested, they're motivated, they're getting attention, they're getting feedback and explanations, and everything seems to be under control. But this is your classic task manager kind of idea of what a good lesson looks like. Just because students are busy doesn't mean they're busy thinking about the right things. They might just be doing repetitive skills. They might be really busy thinking about colouring something in when that's not really necessarily the thing that they need to be doing at that moment, kind of really busy doodling. It looks like they're busy, but they're not really. You'll be giving them loads of feedback, but that doesn't mean they're acting on that feedback. The next kind of branch is then thinking about that kind of curriculum deliverer. So that curriculum has been covered. You've done all that you needed to do here because you have presented that information to the students. And as a result, some of the students definitely know what you're talking about. So some of them might not have understood what's really going on there. Some of them kind of maybe couldn't reproduce that independently and are probably going to forget it by even tomorrow's lesson. And some of them might have already known it. So they've been giving you correct answers, but it's nothing to do with you at all. So that curriculum delivery model is also quite limited. What we want to do is try and kind of use all of these proxies to show us that, okay, these things are happening, but does that mean the students are really learning? And how can we make sure that we're focused on those things? Usually in the first few years of your career, these are the things you're focused on, and they're not bad things. It is a progression. But what we really want you to be able to do is to move away from this idea of kind of what students are doing and what you're doing to what students are learning. And one of the big keys for me for that is creating a coherent curriculum. And I apologise, this is where my maths hub work comes in. So coherence by kind of the maths hub standards, and actually probably across lots of different subjects, looks something like this. They say that these small steps are easier to take. We need to focus on one key point each lesson so that learning is sustainable. We need to be thinking about all of the things that are precursors for later ideas. So how do we build in those prerequisites? When we're introducing new ideas, we need to make sure we're thinking about the connections with earlier ones. And then also thinking about how what we're learning now helps us for the next steps of learning. This is bigger than one lesson. We're talking here about coherence on a really large level, so kind of across the entirety of the curriculum and the entirety of your subject, as opposed to just the coherence in one lesson. We're looking at one key point each lesson to build up an idea over time. That's not to say that there shouldn't be coherence on a micro level within your lesson. They're kind of both really important. But for me, this kind of zoomed out big picture version is what we're really, really interested in seeing. This actually was so important that it started to get picked up by the media. And so there were some lovely articles in 2019 by a friend of Maths Icons, actually, Pete Mattock. So this is one of the quotes from there. I'm just going to let you read it for a second. So again, although this is in a maths context, I think it's really important that actually this could apply to any subject. Rather than thinking about mathematical ideas as are in the centre of the screen, it could be geographical ideas, it could be ideas in English, it could be ideas in business studies or in art. It's really important to focus on the idea that those students need to be working with. And then see how of those things kind of link to the bigger picture of your entirety of your subject, rather than thinking about the process you need them to learn in a lesson. What is it that's going to help them to understand your subject as a whole? This tweet revolutionized the way I thought about planning lessons. Even though I was moving towards this idea of planning kind of a sequence of lessons potentially about the same subject, thinking, you know, I'll get addition of fractions done today, then tomorrow I'll do subtraction, and then I'll do some with mixed numbers, and then I'll think about multiplying and dividing, then I'll think about putting all those things in context. Those were still 1 hour blocks of learning for me at that point. And so in 2019, there was a really interesting discussion where Mark McCaw, who is a fantastic maths advisor, started talking about kind of the lesson being the wrong unit of time for learning. There's lots of kind of spin-off conversations that happen from this tweet, but the idea that we can think everything that we can possibly learn about adding fractions happens in 1 hour is absolutely ridiculous. To think that you can teach everything that you need to about weathering in a geography lesson in 1 hour is also ridiculous. To think that you can teach everything about a specific unit of kind of French grammar might be ridiculous. They're really complex concepts, and so building them is going to take time. And there are interruptions in those, as Mark talks about kind of starters and plenaries, which he's got very strong views on. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with all of that, but they also have lots of lessons in between your lessons where they've got to think about other concepts and other things. And so it's not going to be as simple as one lesson for one concept for me. And so this was the start of me moving away from the lesson as a unit of learning and starting to think about a unit of learning and kind of the lesson being just how long I had on a specific day. So for me, this shift actually coincides with the things that Sam Twistleton talked about in her research. It's a shift from what can you or we as a class do in this hour, from how do I help my students to learn this concept over time. That is your classic moving from a task manager to a kind of curriculum deliverer, all the way into this building of concepts. So we're really wanting students to think about their learning in that lesson rather than thinking about what they're doing and how you're going to keep them busy. What this does is it allows you to see that big picture of your subject. How does that idea fit into this unit? So for me, it might be thinking about how multiplying fractions fits into the context of everything else we've done throughout the fractions unit. But then how does that idea or unit fit into the subject as a whole? How is it that dealing with multiplying fractions is going to help me later on when I think about proportionality? How is it that talking about weathering is going to affect the rest of the GCSE curriculum for geography? How is it that knowing things about World War II can help me really reflect on things that are happening in the present day in history? The next thing that we need to think about is therefore what has happened before. What have we learned earlier on that's going to support what's happening today? For me, if my students can't do multiplication of whole numbers, then it's never going to work for me to be able to teach them how to do that with fractions. So we really need to make sure that these things, these prerequisite skills, are tested and we know that they're strong, and what methods we've used with them to be able to help them kind of accelerate their learning in this unit. And then how is this going to support things that come next? Kind of a very similar idea to what's happened earlier on, but the big thing for me is that I don't want to teach anything now that will contradict what I've taught later. This was something that Danny Quinn, who was head of maths at Michaela School at the time, said at a maths conf a few years ago. And actually for me, it was like a massive eye-opener. I don't want to teach a tip, kind of a trick that's going to help my students to remember something today, but that later on I might regret telling them because it doesn't always work. So is there something that you might say now in a history lesson that contradicts a fact that you're going to tell them later? Is there something that you're going to teach them as a quick memory tool to learn something in languages, but then there's lots of exceptions to that rule that's going to make it harder for them to learn? So thinking about kind of really making sure that this cohesiveness, this coherence is there all the way through everything you're teaching all the time. What have you taught now? What have you taught before? What's coming next? And again, this idea that these complex ideas are going to require time. They're going to require repetition. So looking at things like Rose and Shine, you're going to have to bring things back and recall and recap them so that students are able to use them really well. And so this lesson as a unit isn't really helpful for that. We need to think about that recall and retention over time and how we make sure students are really kind of able to recall and retain that information for their exams in 5 years' time, but also for later on in their life. The big picture for me is quite easy to see if you get a massive pad of A3 paper. So this is one of the tools that the Maths Hub shared with us a few years ago, which is called the S Plan. Now, I'm not bothered about whether you use an S or whether you use a timeline or whether you use some kind of mind map diagram. I really don't mind, but the idea is that this is a method of medium-term planning rather than short-term planning. We're not thinking about the one lesson, we're thinking about the key concepts across an entire unit and thinking about what came before and what comes next. So you can see in my S plan here, right at the top, I'm starting with the prerequisites. I then have got my key ideas numbered from 1 all the way down to 6. What is it that I need to get across in this unit, and how is that going to help with my next unit and even things that are way later in the maths curriculum? So it might be that you do this for whatever subject it is that you're teaching, and you start thinking about, okay, well, in year 7, the students were learning about this particular period of history. We're now learning about this one. All of those ideas come through, and then how is that going to help them to learn the thing they're going to learn, I don't know, in year 11? How is all of that context going to bring everything together to help them? So you're thinking about those start and end points. What is it that the students know now? What is it that you want them to know at the end? And how is it going to help them with things later on? Those prerequisites and key ideas essentially fill the gaps. So your prerequisites where you're starting, your key ideas fill in those gaps on the S in the middle. The order of those key ideas might be something that you want to mess around with. So this one I felt pretty confident with. I'd already kind of worked on it once before and then put more ideas together, but quite often I do this on a massive whiteboard and I put post-it notes all over the place. And we do that as a department as well now, as part of our department planning. Thinking about, for me in maths, the representations of how you want these ideas to get across, the variations of how you want to ask these questions. The biggie kind of that I think is really applicable across all subjects is the misconceptions. So where do those misconceptions come from? How are you going to avoid them? How are you going to bring them to the forefront? Or do you want to bring them to the forefront? Do you want to talk about why those things exist? What tasks and problems is it that you're actually going to use? And so then how you're then going to link those to other topics across your curriculum as well. Planning in a way like this really changed the way I thought about my subject, because I was able to really quickly, and you can see I color code it, kind of identify the things that I was going to do to make a difference to my students' concept building. And then rather than having a PowerPoint for each individual hour, I developed PowerPoints for an entire kind of suite of learning on fractions, decimals, and percentages in this case. And it meant that my students maybe didn't get to finish percentages as a concept in one day or in 1 hour, but I knew that over the course of that suite of lessons, all of these things that I thought were important were going to be done. And I think that this is possible across multiple different subjects. Working with lots of ECTs in the past few years, this is something lots of them have taken on and kind of got different things. So these are kind of the maths key ideas that you need to get into a plan like this. But it might be that in history, you want to think about the sources that you use, or in geography, the diagrams you're going to use, all that kind of those kind of ideas. So it's really adaptable for your subject and what you know that you need to focus on. So that's it for me, really. Starting to think about that lesson as the wrong unit for learning. I think just try it. It will accelerate the way you're thinking about your curriculum kind of 10 times faster and make your kind of teaching 10 times better in 10 times like less time. It took me a long time to learn it. And actually, I think if I'd known it as an ECT, I'd have been better a lot faster. If you want to talk about any of this or anything about teaching and learning in general, there's where to find me. But otherwise, I think I've also made some time back for you as well, Tom. So enjoy the rest of your day and in the rest of the presentations. And I hope to speak to you all soon.
Thank you, Catherine. Absolutely amazing. Thanks so much for giving up the time. Really appreciate it. Again, recommend everyone sign up for the recording, teachmeicons.com. You might be watching this as a recording, actually. So hello if you are, and thank you. Cheers, Catherine. Speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye, mate. Bye. Okay, here is Jake, our final speaker. Jake.
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you brilliant. Loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic.
How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, okay. How are you guys doing? How are you doing, mate?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Good.
Still here, isn't it? Thanks very much for giving up the time. You're our final speaker, so no pressure.
No pressure at all. Just looking to share my screen.
There you go.
Now
it's on the screen now.
Okay.
So if you want to just check, you can move it forward and back.
Yeah.
Should be okay.
Hopefully.
No?
Yeah, should be okay. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Getting there. Okay. All right. Well. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, mate. Okay. Well, thank you first of all. Thanks, Tom, for inviting me to do this session. Really enjoyed that last session, actually, Catherine, as well. I always liked a bit of maths. So they do say maths and languages go quite well together. So I really enjoyed that last session as well. Okay. So really, when Tom asked me to do this, I was kind of thinking, well, 15 years ago was when I was, as it was known then, as an NQT. So got me thinking of just some points without really desperately trying not to be patronising in any kind of way, because nobody needs that, do they? At any time. But really, so I just kind of thought, well, what 5 things? 5 is, of course, that that kind of number, isn't it, that people use when they're doing presentations to focus on. So what potential strategies would I have liked to have sort of known about and considered when I first started teaching in those first few years? So the first sort of 5 that came to mind were: 1, promote a change of activity. Promote a change of activity as a way of promoting attention. And then 2, remember that a lot will be forgotten. 3, don't be a slave to the textbook scheme of work. There is a bit of overlap, I would say, between those 2, of course, as well. 4, practice everything. And 5, as well as teaching behaviour, teach how to revise. So the first really want to go into promote a change of activity as a way of promoting attention. So really, when I first started teaching, something that I used to do when I started was to teach chapters and the textbook and ensure that every lesson had a starter, main body, and plenary, etc. This formula surely led to some sort of disengagement. So to combine, after obviously 2 years or so following that format, to combine a variety of activities which might sort of be considered as games if there were sort of activities, one-off activities. I used several of these activities with the purpose of practice and varying that practice and varying the retrieval, the types of retrieval. So instead of just doing testing, vocab tests, say, and a set vocab test as homework, vocab sort of retrieval tasks in class, retrieval tasks with students going to the walls. A key activity I use loads these days, where I've got magic whiteboards stuck up around the whole of the room, and students will come in and I'll project, say, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, even 30 words and short phrases on the board with the either the English or, of course, the target language covered up. Students grab a pen, go straight to the walls, and they'll write out as many translations into English or into the target language as they can in those few minutes. That would be something that I'd use to vary my practice, vary my retrieval these days. But a number of ways of different sort of variety of practice that I just didn't do when I first started teaching those first few years. And really, yes, of course, one of the key purposes would be to ensure that that content is in students' long-term memory, but also as ensuring that using those activities not just in a lesson as a way of sort of hoping to promote attention, but also across the scheme of learning. So adding that variety to hopefully ensure that the students are engaged through the change of activity is something that I wish I'd considered back then, as opposed to just sticking rigidly to this kind of set procedure. Another thing that we're going to move on to really is activities not being games, this level of gamification. I wish really back then I'd really seriously sat down and thought about I agree with you, Catherine, on that. There's so much overlap, I know. And reading about you, sorry, just to go off a tangent a bit, but reading about what the Mark McCourt tweet, I remember reading that as well. It was, absolutely, really, really hits home with MFL as well. But activities not being games at all. The level of this gamification, which I think has really had a bad name in languages, that we have to go and use games, but they're not games. They're ways of practicing, dare I say it, sort of low element interactivity. I don't mean to sound sort of I don't know, trying to go and bamboozle people, even myself, with some sort of cognitive science sounding term, but sort of low level sort of knowledge, if you like. They're ways of practicing that. And I wish somebody had said to me, look, you're not using games, you're using 5 or 6 of these activities to vary practice, to allow for promoting attention because of the change of activity, but also with the overriding purpose of ensuring that students are going to retain knowledge that you're teaching. So that is the purpose of it. It's not a game, it's a way of practicing. So that is something that I really do wish somebody had sat me down and said, well, don't feel bad about using an activity that you might have thought was a game. It's not. Okay, so that's the first thing, really. The next slide then is of course, really what I've talked about already, remember that a lot will be forgotten. I wish somebody had sat me down and said, well, look, rather than stressing about having to cover the scheme of learning, which was the textbook back then, rather than just really, as you do because you want to do a good job and all of those things. And I remember sitting there and really just spending pretty much a whole weekend just planning ahead for months and making sure that, oh mate, I must teach that module from the textbook on how to go and what was it now? How to go and communicate at a lost and found office. I remember it now, and how to go and manage a train station, and making sure that I'd carried out 3 or 4 activities from the double page spread in the textbook. I mean, why? What kind of pressure was that textbook putting me under to do that? It was absolutely ludicrous. So rather than actually just reflect and think, well, actually, what are they going to forget? And plan around that and think, okay, what are they going to forget? What do they need to know by the end of the course? What is it that's going to transfer across different contexts? What is going to transcend topics? And what is going to have sort of a high level of element interactivity as well? And combining those two things after a fair few years really led to me looking at chunking and teaching chunks. And obviously in languages, Gianfranco Conti, I'm sure everyone would know as well. It's published not so long ago, fantastic, a number of his fantastic blogs, but one of his fantastic blogs on chunking. And it got me thinking, how could you, if you're going to focus on actually what it is you want students to know by the end of the course, what do you have to do? How do you go around it? Could you go and develop a model around it? So that got me thinking that, for instance, something like that chunk there, es importante que se haga algo así de vez en cuando. Could you develop a strategy rather than just somebody saying, teach chunks, or we teach chunks? Can it be sort of explicitly broken down and then shared with colleagues, shared even with students, if you wanted to go and sort of develop that strategy so that students might be able to go and take it on board and transfer that to home? It really got me thinking, could it be done? And yeah, I mean, this is what I came up with. So, as an NQT, I wish somebody had sat me down and said, well, hang on a sec, or, as an RQT, as it was known then, I wish somebody had sat me down and said, well, this is what you can do. Look at a model. Actually, consider this model. And I'm sure there's things with this model that could be adapted and changed. Nothing is always as rigid as you must follow all these steps. But, for instance, if what we're saying is, remember that a lot will be forgotten as one of the key areas to focus on, then you would start by considering what the actual content is that you would want the students to know, and you'd move on from that. So, for instance, looking at the key content that transcends topics and that has that high level of element interactivity, which might be defined as the number of knowledge elements that have to be coordinated in working memory in order to be able to accomplish the actual task of the recall of the chunk. So, for instance, if you might argue that, going back a sec, that this chunk here, es importante que se haga algo así de vez en cuando, has a high level of element interactivity, if it hadn't been taught by a chunk, because you'd have to have the knowledge of the passive, you'd have to have the knowledge of the subjunctive, you'd have to have the recall of the actual sort of vocabulary facts, if you want to refer to them like that, the time phrase, etc. Okay, you'd have to know that you'd have to know that it would be present subjunctive as well here, and obviously es importante would trigger the subjunctive. All those features with this actual chunk would have to be known if you weren't just if you weren't relying on teaching that as an actual set chunk. So, and that's obviously not the only one, of course. Identifying the other chunks which would transfer across different topics, like that one, and have that otherwise sort of high element interactivity attached to it would be things like Je me suis bien amusé in French. So I had a good time, you know, a chunk that would transfer across all these different topics. So if somebody had sat me down and said, teach those no matter what the topic is and test those no matter what the topic is, I would have been really grateful, but broken it down through a set of steps and sort of gone through and explaining, say, why actually this might be so much more effective than just teaching each topic and expecting this this content to be recalled. And if somebody had said, well, okay, how you could potentially do this is simply just presenting it and practicing it in a variety of ways. So, you know, going to the walls, as I mentioned before, you know, projecting, say, a set of key chunks like this on the slide here, so 1 to 9 on the side, covered up. Students go to the walls on magic whiteboards, look around all the whole room, basically, grab a pen, work in pairs, write what they can, you monitor it, working around the room. That would be one effective way as part of this model to help make this content stick. Practicing it in, obviously, a narrow way where you're changing one of the surface features each time, down here for number 4 or number 3, of course. So you've taught a little bit of the grammar behind the chunk, and then you're changing one aspect to the surface feature, so an adjective here and there. So you're actually drilling the same underlying structure each time. And again, no matter what the topic is. So rather than stressing over the topic, focusing on these things. But yes, okay, still delivering on the topics, but making sure, again, you are teaching and testing and practicing the key content that you were hoping will transfer right to the end. And not just the exam, but in a way that's going to be more communicative as well, because of course these are the chunks which transfer so well and transcend. So again, you can look at a strategy that you could finish with by if you'd gone through each chunk and tested it. Something that I've sort of finished with, we were discussing as a department the other day, which is narrow translation dictation. So narrow translation dictation really focuses on the teacher just not showing this as a text, but just dictating it. Students are all working at that same pace. You're dictating the English. Students are writing in the target language where they can. Where they can't write in the target language, they are writing in English. So they'll have a passage of sort of Spanglish or you know, a mix of French and English, German and English, etc. By the end of the process, you'll mark it together. You'll look at the misconceptions, and then you will go and do another very, very similar one. And if you look at number 3 there, obviously the bold and underlined chunks and language on there is what you have changed each time. Obviously, that's pretty much surface structure, atmosphere, noun, posh restaurant, etc. And you would have left the key structures like normally I have a good time and the last time I had a good time within each dictation each time. So again, plotting, doing that 5-6 times across the whole course. If somebody had said that's, you know, plot that in no matter what the topic is, because you want by the end of the course those key structures to have been learned and so well learned that they can transfer, you know, it would have been really, really, really quite effective. So that would be part of sort of the strategy of a teaching chunking that I really would have been grateful for and used and adopted across the course. And again, this ties into it. So don't try not to be a slave to the textbook, the scheme of work. Again, it's what I've said. It's a bit of a repetition about what I was saying just before. Teach and test the key content. Key vocab from the exams is the example underneath there at any point during the course. So looking at it and reflecting on what, and okay, it sounds a little bit teaching to the test, but really looking at the vocabulary here, like ruidoso, noisy. Okay, so not saying to yourself, right, okay, I'm going to wait for the course, I'm going to wait for on the course where ruidoso comes up, on which topic it comes up. That might just appear arbitrarily almost, in the sense that it might appear in year, say at the start of year 11, as part of, say, you imagine you had the house and home topic then. Well, really, so effectively, unless it does come up elsewhere earlier on, you're waiting to be dictated to as to when to teach and test as well, of course, a really essential piece of knowledge. So you're almost limiting yourself to one or two sort of exposures of this key content that you would want students to know until year 11. So you're saying, okay, I'm going to be dictated to by this scheme of learning, and I'm going to go and teach it then, even though I would want plenty of opportunities, more than just say 2 or 3, to allow those students to practice and learn it and really just retain it, because it's so important. And again, because it's been identified ruidoso as being absolutely key knowledge in terms of having come up on the reading and listening papers, several times. You would want students to know it, of course. So not being a slave to that textbook and scheme of work is something that, and not worrying about, of course, if it hasn't been retained the first time, knowing that these kind of things have to be taught and tested and practiced in different kind of ways across the whole course many times before it is retained. So it's something that it took me a while to adapt my thinking around that, because I felt that if I wasn't just really, as I've said a number of times, I know already, but because I felt that if I wasn't adhering to the scheme of learning, then it was, well, rigidly so, of course, then I felt I was almost doing the students a disservice, when really what I was doing them a disservice, because I wasn't ensuring that the key content was fully learned. Okay, and then of course, just 2 left then. Practice everything. This is just practicing behavior routines, and see Tom Bennett's Running the Room book for that, really. But making sure that opportunities to sort of even practice the routines about putting the dictionaries back in the box correctly, knowing where the paper is to go and collect if students have forgotten the book. So of course, yes, as well as the behavior routines, it's practicing logistical routines as well, making sure that that they know, that students know exactly all of the sort of the procedural knowledge that they have to know in terms of you being able to manage the classroom effectively, not just assuming that they know where those things are. And that might seem quite glib, this one, but it's something to me that just the idea of practice and practice making permanent, which is referred to in Duglamov's book Practice Perfect, it really quite sort of just opened my eyes. It's quite a straightforward concept, isn't it? That the idea of ensuring that students have plenty of practice will help, but practicing routines in the classroom was just and practicing so that students are making things permanent, those routines permanent, really just it helped me to put things into the context of students' availability bias, so that students may not be aware of and not only the not explicitly was something that I had to really think about, and it helped me to think about it after reading those two books. And finally, so just teaching how to revise as well. So making sure, for example, this might include things like teaching the use of the keyword method in class, so that it transfers to an out-of-school context, teaching how to retrieve the chunks away from school, teaching where the pathways are for all revision documents, for instance. So the exam specification, the past papers themselves as well, teaching how to use the examiner reports to check on misconceptions following a past paper. all of those things actually, when I first started teaching, hadn't occurred to me that I should be doing. It was more just of an assumption made. So really, just on reflection, it's helped me actually doing this session, because having to reflect on what I didn't know, as I still do now, has really just sharpened my practice up again. And I've already thought of a couple of changes that I can make to that model of chunking that I was referring to earlier. So doing all of this has made me reflect on once again on some of the changes that I will be taking and making. Okay, so I hope this short session was of some use, and thanks again to Tom, and hope obviously everyone's well. And if you need to contact me, I haven't actually put my details on there, but fine, anytime, guys, if anybody wants to make contact with me. So on Twitter on Jake Hunton MFL. Okay. Thanks,
that was amazing, Jake. Thanks so much indeed for doing it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Tom.
Cheers, Jake. See you later.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. That's it, everyone. Fantastic session. If you've watched this live, if you've watched it back on the recording, thanks to you. And we'll see you again very soon. We've got a PSHE event coming up at the end of May. So check out the website, teachmeeticons.com, for all the details on that and to sign up. Lots of face-to-face events coming too. So check it out on the website. We're excited about it. I'm sure you will be too. And we'll see you next time. Thanks to all the speakers today. And of course, the sponsors, People Progress and Teachers Love Stationery. See you later. Bye-bye.